In the heart of Sydney's central business district, where towering skyscrapers define the skyline and the city pulses with activity, a devastating crime unfolded on August 13, 2019, claiming the life of Michaela Dunn. 3 years earlier, on May 14, 2016, in the vibrant suburb of Parramatta, a brutal assault left Dasha Volnukin deeply traumatized, with her death in May 2018 adding to the sorrow. These incidents, occurring in modern urban settings, shocked their communities and sparked widespread concern about safety in Australia's cities, particularly for those in vulnerable professions like escorting. The stories of Michaela and Dasha, though distinct, highlight the hidden dangers faced by escort profession and the urgent need for systemic protections. Michaela Dunn, a 24-year-old Sydney resident, was tragically murdered in 2019, leaving her family, friends, and community grappling with profound loss. Her death underscored the risks that can persist even in environments designed for security, challenging assumptions about urban safety. Similarly, Dasha Volnukin, a 22-year-old Ukrainian model who had moved to Australia in 2015, endured a horrific assault that marked her life with lasting trauma. Her resilience in reporting the crime led to justice, but her untimely death 2 years later deepened the tragedy. On August 13, 2019, at approximately 1:30 p.m., police received an urgent call about a violent incident in a high-rise apartment on Clarence Street, a bustling thoroughfare in Sydney's CBD lined with corporate offices and residential complexes. Emergency services arrived promptly, discovering a distressing scene inside a modern apartment building. Forensic investigators cordoned off the area, documenting evidence of a struggle, such as disarrayed furniture and personal items. Neighbors reported hearing disturbances, but the building's soundproofed walls obscured critical details, complicating initial inquiries. The investigation revealed that Michaela had been fatally wounded, her body bearing a severe neck injury that marked the brutality of the attack. 3 years earlier, on May 14, 2016, at 1:30 a.m., a similar tragedy struck in Parramatta, a dynamic suburb 25 kilometers west of Sydney's CBD, known for its rich cultural diversity and thriving commercial scene. Dasha Volnukin faced a terrifying assault in a residential unit. The incident unfolded discreetly, leaving few immediate clues. Security footage captured a man, later identified as Mustafa Kairisai, 28, entering and exiting the building, but provided no direct evidence of the violence that transpired inside. Dasha's prompt reporting to police, including detailed descriptions of her assailant, was crucial in advancing the investigation, despite the private nature of the crime. Michaela and Dasha, both young women in their early 20s, lived in Sydney, residing in apartments equipped with modern security features. The fact that these violent acts occurred in private, supposedly safe spaces stunned local residents and prompted extensive police investigations. Authorities worked diligently to establish timelines, interview potential witnesses, and determine whether the cases were connected. While no direct link was confirmed, both women worked as escorts, a legal but high-risk profession in Australia, which emerged as a significant commonality. This shared profession highlighted the vulnerabilities inherent in escort profession, where financial independence comes at the cost of exposure to potential danger. To fully appreciate the impact of these events, it's essential to understand Michaela and Dasha as individuals with unique aspirations and challenges. Their lives, though cut short by tragedy, reflect the complexities of navigating personal and professional choices in a fast-paced, high-cost city like Sydney. Michaela Dunn was a proud Sydney native, raised in inner West Sydney, a region celebrated for its close-knit communities and eclectic atmosphere. By 2019, she had entered the escort industry, a decision that offered financial independence in Sydney's competitive economy. Escorting, while legal in New South Wales, can provide significant earnings, enabling flexibility and opportunities like travel. Michaela's choice to keep her work private was likely influenced by societal stigma, which is a common practice among escorts to protect their personal relationships. Friends remembered her as a compassionate and resilient individual, whose warmth left a lasting impression on those around her. Her engagement with Sydney's vibrant cultural scenes, from art galleries to nightlife, reflected a young woman embracing the city's dynamic spirit. Dasha Volnukin, born in Canada, arrived in Australia in 2015, drawn to Sydney's cosmopolitan allure and economic prospects. At 22, she worked as a model and escort, roles that showcased her confidence and adaptability. Her move to Australia was driven by a desire for new opportunities, but the challenges of building a life in a new country were significant. Dasha's decision to enter the escort industry was kept discreet, likely to avoid judgment in a society that often stigmatizes escort. Friends described her as empathetic and determined, qualities that helped her navigate the complexities of migration and work. Her brief tenure as an escort exposed her to rapid risks, culminating in the traumatic assault that would shape her final years. Both Michaela and Dasha pursued escorting to achieve financial stability and shape their futures in Sydney's demanding environment. The promise of autonomy in a city with high living costs was compelling, yet their profession brought them into contact with dangerous individuals. These incidents underscore the vulnerabilities inherent in escort, despite its legality, and highlight the need for enhanced protections to ensure worker safety. The events leading to these tragedies began with Michaela's murder on August 13, 2019. That day, Sydney's CBD was alive with midday activity, its streets filled with office workers and visitors. In her Clarence Street apartment, designed with modern security measures for young professionals, Michaela prepared to meet a client for a routine appointment. The client, Mert Ney, entered the building mid-afternoon, passing through standard entry protocols. What began as a typical booking turned deadly when Ney attacked Michaela, inflicting a fatal neck wound. He fled via the fire stairs, bloodied, leaving behind evidence of the crime. Police found Michaela deceased in her apartment, a space intended as a sanctuary, revealing a shocking breach of safety. On May 14, 2016, Dasha faced her own harrowing ordeal in a Parramatta residential unit. Arranging a client visit, she met Mustafa Kairisai, who appeared unremarkable upon entry. Inside the apartment, Kairisai turned violent, threatening Dasha with a knife, blindfolding her, and binding her with duct tape. He abused her and forced her to shower, attempting to erase evidence. Dasha survived by complying, but the trauma was profound. After Kairisai fled, she reported the incident to police, providing critical details that aided the investigation. The building's modern design and privacy features limited witness accounts, posing challenges for authorities, but Dasha's courage in reporting the crime was pivotal. Both Michaela and Dasha encountered clients who transformed private meetings into violent ordeals, exposing the inherent dangers of their profession. These incidents, occurring in secure urban settings, challenged assumptions about safety in modern cities and sparked public discourse about the risks faced by sex workers. The investigation into Michaela's death began swiftly on August 13, 2019, at her Clarence Street apartment. Police discovered her body with a fatal neck injury, and forensic teams meticulously collected evidence, including traces of the struggle. Security footage revealed Mert Ney, aged 21, entering the building at 1:30 p.m. and fleeing bloodied at 1:50 p.m., brandishing a knife. Ney's erratic behavior on Clarence Street alarmed pedestrians, leading bystanders to pursue him with improvised tools, a chair and a milk crate, restraining him near Wynyard Lane until police arrested him at 2 p.m. A USB drive containing violent material was recovered, but no terrorist motives were confirmed. Ney, unemployed and residing in Blacktown, had documented mental health struggles, which police noted as a potential factor, though his intent remained unclear. A search of his Blacktown residence provided further context, suggesting financial distress may have contributed to his actions. Dasha's assault investigation progressed due to her immediate report on May 14, 2016. She described her assailant's appearance and actions, which, combined with CCTV footage from the Parramatta unit, helped police identify Kairisai. The footage showed Kairisai entering and exiting calmly, offering no hint of the violence inside. Police canvassed Parramatta, but the building's security measures limited witness accounts. Dasha's description aligned with other assault reports, leading to Kairisai's arrest on May 28, 2016, in Bondi after a pursuit. He was linked to multiple attacks on escorts in 2016, indicating a pattern of predatory behavior. Mert Ney, responsible for Michaela's murder, had a troubled background marked by unemployment and mental health issues. Living in crisis housing in Blacktown in 2019, he faced significant personal challenges, including financial instability and untreated mental health conditions. His arrest initiated legal proceedings for murder, attempted murder of another individual, Lynn Bowe, aged 41, and related offenses. No clear motive was established, with his actions attributed to a combination of mental instability and situational factors. Mustafa Kayirasai, born around 1985, targeted escorts in Sydney during 2016. Court records indicate his attacks were planned, exploiting the vulnerabilities of escort. On May 14, he abused Dasha, using a knife to intimidate her and employing tactics like blindfolding and binding to control the situation. Similar incidents in the CBD and Parramatta suggested a deliberate pattern. Kayirasai's defense claimed his actions were influenced by personal issues, but evidence of premeditation prevailed. He faced multiple charges, reflecting the severity of his crimes. The cases of Mert Nay and Mustafa Kayirasai illustrate divergent pathways to violence, each underscoring unique challenges in addressing crime in urban Australia. Nay's attack on Michaela was a chaotic, impulsive act, seemingly driven by personal distress and mental health struggles, reflecting a life marked by instability. In contrast, Kayirasai's assault on Dasha was systematic and predatory, exploiting the vulnerabilities of sex workers in a calculated manner. Their arrests marked the beginning of legal efforts to hold them accountable for the harm inflicted on Michaela, Dasha, and others. The legal proceedings for Dasha's case unfolded at Sydney's Downing Centre District Court, focusing on the May 14, 2016, assault and related crimes. Prosecutors presented Dasha's testimony, which detailed the harrowing ordeal, alongside CCTV footage from the Parramatta unit that corroborated her account. The evidence highlighted Kayirasai's methodical tactics, including his use of a knife and attempts to erase evidence. The defense argued that Kayirasai's actions were influenced by personal circumstances, but the prosecution emphasized his intent to harm. Dasha passed away in May 2018, 2 years after the assault. Her loss deepened the sorrow felt by her friends and community, who remembered her as a vibrant, resilient individual. Tributes highlighted her determination and warmth, qualities that shone through despite the trauma she endured. Her work as a model and her efforts to build a life in Australia reflected a young woman full of promise, making her death all the more poignant. Mert Nay's trial, following his August 2019 arrest, was a significant undertaking at the Downing Centre District Court. Prosecutors argued that Nay's actions were premeditated, pointing to his possession of a knife and his behavior after the crime, which included fleeing bloodied and brandishing the weapon in public. Justice Peter Johnson, presiding over the case, described the attack as exceptionally brutal, noting its devastating impact on Michaela's family and community. Nay's defense team highlighted his mental health struggles, including untreated conditions that may have contributed to his actions. However, evidence of his awareness during the crime undermined these arguments. On May 14, 2021, Nay was sentenced to 44 years in prison with a 33-year non-parole period, reflecting the severity of the offense. In October 2023, an appeal reduced his sentence to 40 years with a 30-year non-parole period, acknowledging procedural considerations while maintaining significant accountability. In 2022, Nay pleaded guilty to assaulting a guard at Goulburn Correctional Centre, receiving a concurrent sentence that did not extend his overall term, raising questions about managing ongoing risks posed by incarcerated individuals. Sydney's CBD, a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, and Parramatta, a multicultural suburb undergoing rapid urban renewal, served as the backdrops for these tragedies. Michaela's apartment on Clarence Street, located near iconic landmarks like the Sydney Harbour Bridge, and the Parramatta unit where Dasha was assaulted, represented modern urban living with advanced security features. Yet, these settings fail to protect Michaela and Dasha, exposing a stark paradox: private spaces, designed for safety, can become sites of extreme violence. This contradiction fueled public discourse about urban safety and the vulnerabilities inherent in certain professions, particularly escort. The escort industry in Australia, legally recognised in New South Wales since 1995, operates within a complex and often challenging landscape. Escorts, whether working independently or through agencies, can earn substantial incomes, particularly in high-cost cities like Sydney, where living expenses drive many to seek lucrative opportunities. Michaela and Dasha's decisions to enter this field likely stemmed from the need for financial independence in a competitive economy. Escorting offers flexibility and the potential for significant earnings, with hourly rates in Sydney often ranging from $300 to $1,000, depending on services and clientele. However, the industry's risks, violence, stigma, and inadequate safety measures place workers in precarious positions. Unlike other professions, escorting lacks standardized protections, such as mandatory client screening, accessible emergency support systems, or comprehensive training on risk management. These gaps were evident in Michaela and Dasha's cases, where private meetings with clients turned deadly or traumatic, highlighting the urgent need for reform. Police investigations into both cases relied on established methods for urban crime, including security footage, witness statements, and victim reports. The rapid arrest of Mert Ney on August 13, 2019, demonstrated the power of community intervention. Bystanders, witnessing Ney's erratic behavior on Clarence Street, courageously restrained him using a chair and a milk crate, preventing further harm until police arrived. Their actions became a symbol of community resilience, widely covered by Australian media, and sparked discussions about the role of civilians in public safety. Dasha's prompt and detailed report on May 14, 2016, was equally critical, enabling police to identify Mustafa Kayirasai through CCTV and her descriptions. However, the scarcity of witnesses in modern residential buildings, designed with privacy in mind, posed significant challenges. In Parramatta, the unit's security measures limited external accounts, complicating efforts to corroborate Dasha's testimony and underscoring a broader issue in investigating private space crimes. Serial offender Mustafa Kayirasai was sentenced to 34 years in prison in August 2021 for 30 counts of abuse, abuse assault, and child abuse, having abuse assaulted a schoolgirl over 5 hours at 10 locations in 2016. He received an additional 38-year sentence for the abuse and robbery of 7 other women in the same year, including Dasha Volnukin. In 2021, Kayirasai was given just 12 months to live after being diagnosed with an undisclosed terminal illness and undergoing chemotherapy in prison. Had he survived, he would not have been eligible for release until 2066. Correctional Services NSW confirmed that 31-year-old Kayirasai died in the high-security prison block at Prince of Wales Hospital in January 2022. Australia's legal system, grounded in common law principles, delivered verdicts in both cases, but the outcomes revealed systemic challenges. Ney's 40-year sentence, adjusted on appeal in October 2023, and Kayirasai's 72-year sentence in 2021 provided a measure of accountability, yet the prolonged trials and complex defenses, particularly Ney's mental health arguments, delayed resolution for the victims' families. The economic realities of Sydney, one of the world's most expensive cities, played a significant role in Michaela and Dasha's choices. With median rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the CBD exceeding $700 per week in 2019, and living costs rising steadily, many young people turn to high-paying industries like escorting to afford a comfortable lifestyle. This economic pressure, combined with the flexibility of escort profession, makes it an attractive option, yet the lack of regulatory oversight leaves workers exposed to exploitation and violence. Comparative data from other decriminalized jurisdictions, such as New Zealand, suggests that mandatory client registries and worker support networks can reduce violence, offering a model for Australia to consider. Implementing such measures could address the systemic vulnerabilities exposed by these cases, ensuring that financial necessity does not come at the cost of safety. The role of technology in these investigations also warrants examination. CCTV footage was pivotal in both cases, providing visual evidence that linked Ney and Kayirasai to the crime scenes. However, the limitations of surveillance in private spaces, where cameras are restricted to common areas like lobbies, highlight a gap in evidence collection. Balancing technological innovation with civil liberties is a critical challenge for Australian law enforcement, particularly in high-density urban areas where crimes often occur behind closed doors. The legacy of Michaela Dunn and Dasha Volnukin serves as a powerful call to action. Their stories, though marked by loss, highlight the resilience of individuals and communities in the face of adversity. Michaela's vibrant engagement with Sydney's cultural life and Dasha's determination to build a new life in Australia reflect young women full of potential, whose lives were cut short by preventable violence. By addressing the systemic issues exposed by their cases, urban safety gaps, escort vulnerabilities, mental health deficiencies, and sentencing disparities, Australia can honor their memory through meaningful change. Enhanced protections, better support systems, and a commitment to equity can ensure that no one else faces such preventable harm, creating safer, more inclusive communities for all. Emily Beatriz Azevedo Sena was born in Várzea Grande, a city in the Brazil state of Mato Grosso. She lived with her mother and her stepfather, who became a father figure to her when she was 6. He worked as a radiology technician at Santa Helena Hospital in the nearby city of Cuiabá. The family lived a modest yet close-knit life. Emily was known for her kind nature, calm demeanor. Classmates and neighbors often described her as a gentle person who avoided conflict. At 16, Emily found out she was pregnant, a surprising discovery that she ultimately accepted. The father was a young partner of similar age. Instead of pulling away, he supported her throughout the situation. They started living together and he actively participated in getting ready for the baby's arrival. He went with Emily to doctor visits, assisted with planning, took part in conversations about names and baby items. Despite their youth, her partner demonstrated a strong sense of responsibility, dedication. Although their relationship encountered challenges because of their age, it was characterized as stable, supportive. For Emily, becoming pregnant was a major milestone in her life. She eagerly talked about her future daughter and shared her excitement with family, friends. Her mother and stepfather were very supportive, helping her choose furniture, buy clothes, prepare the nursery. Their home was filled with joy and anticipation. They celebrated the gender reveal twice, once with her partner's relatives and again with Emily's family. Friends remembered how glowing she looked when discussing her journey to motherhood. In another part of Mato Grosso, Natalie Helen Martins Pereira, a 25-year-old married to Christian Albino Cibalho de Arruda, 28, was raising their 3 children, a girl and 2 boys. Natalie worked in public safety, officially employed by the fire department while also taking nursing classes. To others, she seemed organized, responsible. However, beneath this surface, her life was more complicated. Several years ago, Natalie had a medical procedure that tied her fallopian tubes, which prevented her from becoming pregnant naturally. Despite this, she began claiming that she was expecting another child. To support her claims, Natalie created fake medical documents, including ultrasound images, and told others that she was having a baby girl. Christian believed her and shared the news on social media, posted the ultrasound images, even organized a gender reveal party. To make her story seem more convincing, Natalie often posted pictures of herself with what looked like a growing belly or loose clothing and explained her physical appearance as a sign of her impending delivery. In reality, this was all part of a carefully orchestrated and emotionally manipulative lie, a fake pregnancy that relied on fabricated evidence. Natalie not only staged a fake situation but also created an online identity. She joined various online groups for expecting mothers, where she pretended to be a helpful member who often offered items like baby clothes, diapers, and accessories to other moms-to-be. However, there was a catch. The items could only be picked up in person at her house, and the person collecting them had to come alone. This was a deliberate strategy where her online persona was used to make contacts and choose potential targets. No one in Natalie's close circle, neither Christian nor her family, realized that her cheerful demeanor was a meticulously crafted facade. She was intent on making her story a reality, regardless of the consequences. A few weeks before her disappearance, Emily started participating more often in online groups for expecting mothers. She shared her pregnancy thoughts, sought advice, and welcomed support. In one of these forums, she was approached by a user. Her messages were friendly. She offered to donate items for Emily's future daughter, such as clothes, baby blankets, and diapers. This seemed generous, and Emily was genuinely interested. Their conversation soon turned more personal. The user came across as warm and caring, emphasizing her desire to help. When Emily suggested bringing someone with her, like her partner or sister, Natalie became uneasy. She mentioned that her street had many nosy neighbors, and she wanted to avoid attracting any attention. Although her responses were unclear, they didn't raise any major red flags. Emily talked it over with her family and initially decided against going by herself. However, she changed her mind after Natalie offered to send a driver to pick her up, saying the car would be from a ride-sharing service like Uber. On March 12, 2024, around noon, a car came to pick up Emily. However, the driver, as later discovered by investigators, was not affiliated with any ride-sharing service. It was believed that he was either a relative or a friend of Natalie. The car was an ordinary civilian vehicle. Unaware of any potential danger, Emily got in after telling her mother that she would be back soon. She thought the outing would be just a quick trip to collect some donated items before returning home. After more than an hour without any updates from Emily, her mother, Anna Paula Meridian, started to feel anxious. Soon, messages began to come from Emily's phone. However, instead of soothing her worries, the texts only increased her anxiety. Emily claimed she was fine, enjoying a pastry, and would be back soon. Yet, something felt wrong. The language used was strange, overly formal, and didn't match Emily's usual way of writing. Anna quickly realized that someone else must have sent the messages. She attempted to call Emily, but there was no response, and her voice messages went unheard. As her concern grew, the family reached out to friends and acquaintances in hopes of finding Emily. Emily's stepfather was working at the hospital that day. He sensed something was wrong. He knew Emily had intended to pick up some items, and her failure to answer calls made him even more anxious. That evening, the family quickly decided to file a missing person report. At that time, no one knew where Emily was, who the driver was, or where she was headed. The only clue the family had was an online conversation with the woman, who mentioned living in the Jardim Florianopolis neighborhood in Cuiabá. This clue marked the beginning of a search by family members and friends. Worried and desperate, they knocked on doors in the neighborhood, checked the streets, and attempted to call the number mentioned in the messages, but no one answered. Communication had completely stopped. Emily's phone was still on, but she wasn't answering. Then, Natalie suddenly changed her online behavior. She stopped replying to chat group messages and withdrew her support for others. Later, it was revealed that shortly after Emily left home, Natalie deleted all her messages and her account. This disappearance from the online world only confirmed the family's deepest fears. This was not a chance occurrence. By the evening of March 12th, the search for Emily was in full swing. Her family had reached out to the local police, shared her photos on social media, and appealed to the public for assistance. The initial hours after her disappearance were filled with urgency and anxiety, but no one anticipated how drastically the situation would develop. The following morning, March 13, 2024, a woman arrived at the emergency room of Santa Helena Hospital in Cuiabá with a newborn. She was in a wheelchair and told the hospital staff that she had given birth at home the day before. She described the labor as quick and straightforward, so she hadn't felt the need for medical help at that time. Now, she said, she was just there for a post-delivery checkup. The woman introduced herself as Natalie. That morning, the hospital staff member on duty was Emily's stepfather, a radiology technician. Although he did not know Natalie personally, he immediately sensed that something was wrong when he saw her. The previous evening, Emily had gone missing, and one of the primary theories suggested it was linked to a conversation she had with an online stranger who was offering baby items. Emily had previously mentioned to both her mother and her stepfather that she met someone online. She even shared a photo of her from the messaging app. Emily's stepfather immediately recognized the woman in the photo as the same person Emily had been talking to before she disappeared. Natalie was holding a newborn baby that the doctors believed had just been born. However, something seemed unusual. Her behavior and physical state did not align with what one would expect from someone who had recently given birth. There were no visible signs of pain, post-labor symptoms, bleeding, or trauma. Medical staff also found that she was not producing milk when she tried to breastfeed. Even the way she stood and moved raised concerns. Even though she arrived in a wheelchair, she moved around confidently and chose to sit in a chair rather than needing to. A preliminary medical evaluation raised concerns. There were no signs that she had recently given birth. Her cervix was not dilated, and her uterus was of normal size, showing no changes or discharges that usually occur after delivery. This became crucial evidence that proved her story was false. The medical staff quickly informed hospital administrators and contacted local authorities about the situation. Emily's stepfather told investigators that Emily had gone missing the day before after planning to meet a woman. When he recognized the woman in front of him matched Emily's description and photo, his concerns grew. When officers arrived at the hospital, Natalie claimed that the newborn girl was her daughter, whom she had given birth to at home. She could not provide any documentation to support her claim, saying the birth was unexpected and there was no time to go to a medical facility. She answered questions calmly and showed no signs of distress. Investigators started looking into the origin of the newborn. They ordered emergency blood tests and DNA analysis. Medical professionals confirmed that the baby had been born within the last 24 hours, which matched the timeline of Emily's disappearance. This led to a troubling question: could this child be Emily's daughter? Investigators examined Natalie's phone and found deleted conversations, including exchanges with Emily. These messages showed that Emily had agreed to meet Natalie to receive baby items. This evidence indicated a clear pattern of deception. Natalie had created a false identity, gained trust, and arranged a meeting under false pretenses. At this point, the idea that Natalie had simply gone to the hospital for a checkup was no longer believable. Law enforcement began to suspect that Natalie may have brought a baby that she did not give birth to, but rather one that was taken from someone else. Their suspicions were confirmed when they analyzed ultrasound images that Natalie had shared on social media. Investigators discovered that these images did not belong to her. They were taken from another woman's profile, a woman living in a different state, who had no known connection to Natalie. As these discrepancies emerged, the police shifted their focus to finding Emily. The infant Natalie had brought to the hospital was placed in temporary protective custody, under the care of social services, until her biological identity could be verified. Shortly after, Natalie was taken to the police station for formal questioning. At first, she remained silent. When directly asked about the child's origin, she gave vague answers, claiming that everything had been explained and that nothing wrong had occurred. Although she appeared calm and showed no signs of panic, her reluctance to provide a clear explanation led investigators to suspect that she was stalling. Only after investigators showed her the medical exam results, which disproved her claim of giving birth, along with the recovered text messages linking her to Emily, did Natalie change her story. She then shared her initial account of events. She claimed to have met Emily in online parenting groups and said that Emily was struggling in her relationship. Emily had thought about not keeping the baby. Natalie asserted that she offered to take care of the child and that Emily had agreed. However, law enforcement had doubts about this explanation. Emily's family strongly denied any claims that she intended to give up her daughter. They insisted that Emily had been excited about her baby's arrival and never showed any doubts about keeping her. The whole family actively prepared for the new baby by buying clothes, setting up a nursery, and celebrating together. Emily's mother and stepfather emphasized that she viewed her future daughter as the most important part of her life, and the thought of giving the baby away was entirely unthinkable for her. This information was part of the official case file, and Natalie's statements were now being examined for inconsistencies. When faced with increasing evidence, Natalie eventually changed her story. In a second interview with investigators, she confessed that she had tricked Emily into coming to a house by pretending to offer baby items. Emily arrived alone, as they had agreed in their online communication. Emily then began to feel pain and sat down, complaining of cramps. At that moment, Natalie approached her from behind and forcefully restrained her. After Emily lost consciousness, Natalie bound her wrists and ankles with materials she had available. She then tried to deliver the baby by making an incision in Emily's abdomen with a sharp kitchen tool. Emily received no medical assistance and ultimately died due to severe blood loss. Natalie did not express any regret in her statement. She claimed that she wanted to take care of the baby and did not mean to cause any harm. However, the way she acted, using restraints and preparing certain materials, suggested that her actions were thought out beforehand. As Natalie continued to speak, her versions of events became more inconsistent with the facts. Investigators ultimately determined that the incident was pre-planned. After questioning Natalie, law enforcement started investigating all places associated with her. One property in the Jardim Florianopolis area received special attention. This private residence, owned by Natalie's brother, was said to be where she met Emily. During the property inspection, police noticed an area behind the house where the ground looked recently disturbed. The soil was uneven. They quickly cordoned off the area and called in forensic specialists. As the specialists carefully removed the top layer of soil, they discovered that a body had been buried. Emily's body was found in a shallow grave, covered loosely with dirt and debris. The way the body was positioned indicated it had been disposed of hurriedly. Her wrists and ankles showed signs of restraints, including ropes and bits of plastic cable. Investigators later determined that the bindings were made from old internet wiring. The grave itself was poorly dug, without the use of tools, and was barely big enough to hold the body. Emily's body displayed clear signs of trauma on her body. Her face had visible injuries, including bruises, swelling, and scratches. Forensic experts noted damage to her cheekbones and nose. There were also marks on her neck that suggested she had been choked, as well as bruises on her wrists indicating she had been forcefully held down. The autopsy revealed that these injuries occurred while she was alive, implying the use of significant force. It was determined that her death resulted from severe blood loss due to a deep wound in her abdomen. The precise T-shaped incision in her lower abdomen indicated that it was not an accident. Forensic experts indicated that the shape and depth of the cut suggested the perpetrator had a basic understanding of internal anatomy and made an effort to avoid injuring the baby. This degree of knowledge is rare for someone without medical training, although it could be obtained by watching detailed instructional videos. This was further confirmed by analyzing Natalie's internet search history. A key finding was that the burial site had been prepped in advance. Initially, Natalie claimed she dug the grave after the incident, but she later changed her story, admitting it was prepared the day before the meeting. A forensic team carefully examined the scene. Using chemical tests, they discovered important traces of biological material both inside the house and throughout the property. Blood stains were present in multiple rooms. Although some parts of the floor had been cleaned, residues were still left in the tile grout and seams. These findings were meticulously recorded and included in the criminal case. Given the amount of evidence, authorities officially reclassified the case as a premeditated crime with aggravating factors. Immediately after her arrest, Natalie stated that she acted alone and that her husband, relatives, anyone else were unaware of her plans. At that time, the house was occupied by her brother and his wife. Natalie stated that her brother and his wife were not home when the crime happened, but investigators could not confirm this. Their exact whereabouts during that time remained uncertain. A significant question was whether they could genuinely be unaware of a freshly dug pit on the property or that someone had come in to help clean the house. However, it was later established that Natalie had been to the house several times leading up to the incident, under the pretense of helping with chores or spending the weekend. This made her visit seem normal and unremarkable to those living there. Forensic experts noted that it would be very challenging for a single person to dig a pit, commit an act of violence, perform a makeshift procedure, move a body, clean the crime scene, hide evidence, and leave the area without drawing attention, all within a short period. This is especially true given the logistical difficulties involved. The body was wrapped in fabric and required various materials, while the cleaning process included removing items, white blood, and washing clothing. Each of these tasks demanded time, strength, and coordination. Did Natalie truly act alone? At the time of the investigation, there were increasing suspicions, but no solid evidence was found linking anyone else to the case. No family member had been officially identified as an accomplice. Cayo Police Chief Fernando Alvarez Albuquerque said authorities are continuing to investigate whether Natalie's husband, brother, and the driver had anything to do with the death and burial. After the body was officially identified and all forensic procedures were completed, Emily's family received permission for a burial. Because of the condition of the remains, the service was conducted quickly. The ceremony was brief and did not include a traditional farewell. It was held privately, attended only by immediate family members, Emily's mother, stepfather, the young father of the baby, and a few other relatives. The family was devastated by the loss. They were deeply affected emotionally and unable to speak publicly about their grief. Emily's mother, as reported by those close to her, was in a fragile emotional state and had withdrawn from social interactions, avoiding even her neighbors. Emily's partner, who never expected to become a father under such tragic circumstances. According to the family, he has remained dedicated. He frequently visits the baby. Despite his young age, he has shown a desire to be actively involved in raising his daughter. The newborn, who was rescued after the incident, has been placed temporarily in the care of her grandmother, Emily's mother, a decision made by child welfare authorities and the district attorney's office. Emily's stepfather is also considered one of the responsible guardians. During the first few weeks, medical professionals monitored the baby's condition closely. Fortunately, she stayed in stable health. After receiving medical clearance, the baby was taken home to the same place where her mother had lived. The reason for Natalie's actions remained a key topic of conversation. Even though she was already a mother of 3, she pretended to be pregnant for almost 9 months, creating an illusion of expecting another child. She went to great lengths to forge medical records and create a believable story online, portraying herself as an expectant parent on social media. However, her goal was not just to have another baby. She specifically sought out expecting mothers who were likely to have daughters. Her method of selecting targets, arranging the setting, and researching how to remove and take baby indicated that her actions were carefully planned. Natalie is still in custody, waiting for her trial. The charges against her are still active, and investigators believe the evidence supporting these charges is strong. Emily's case has gained significant attention and raised serious concerns, influencing how online interactions are perceived, particularly among vulnerable groups. On July 29, 2016, Gabriella and her younger sister, Sunilda, started their day as usual. That evening, they planned to visit a nearby internet cafe to work on some school assignments. Because they didn't have internet at home, these trips to the local cafe had become a regular part of their lives. Going to the cafe was how they accessed the internet to stay connected and complete their assignments. Around 6 p.m., Gabriella and Sunilda left the house as usual, without causing any concern. But after walking a few blocks, Gabriella abruptly changed her mind. She told Sunilda that she wouldn't be accompanying her and that she was going to see her boyfriend instead. Sunilda was a little surprised but didn't ask any questions. Gabriella had gone off alone before. Gabriella assured her she would return soon, then walked away in the opposite direction. That was the last time the two sisters saw each other. Sunilda went to the cafe by herself. That evening, when she got home, she realized that Gabriella still wasn't back yet. Al principio, nadie le dio mucha importancia. Es como que los adolescentes se queden fuera hasta tarde, especialmente en verano. Sin embargo, a medida que anochecia, la preocupación empezó a aumentar. Liliana, their mother, tried to call Gabriella but got no answer. She sent messages on WhatsApp, which at first were not read. Later, the messages appeared as read, but Gabriella never replied. It was clear someone was seeing the messages, but not responding. Panic set in when a young man, whom the family believed to be Gabriella's boyfriend, showed up at their door. He asked a question that stunned everyone, because they had all assumed that Gabriella was with him. His confusion seemed real. He truly didn't know where she was. That moment changed everything. Until then, everyone had just thought Gabriella was out later than usual. If her boyfriend hadn't seen her that night, it's possible she never made it to meet him. That's when her family realized something was wrong. Sunilda remembered watching Gabriella turn a corner in the direction of a boarding house where one of their relatives had once lived. At the time, it hadn't seemed significant. The next morning, it was obvious that Gabriella was missing. Her phone was still active, but she didn't answer any calls. The mood at home grew tense. Her loved ones started reaching out to everyone they knew, relatives, friends, even her father, but nobody knew where she was. It seemed as though she had vanished without a trace. The family decided to take official action. Liliana contacted the local authorities, who then opened the missing person case. Soon after, flyers about the case were posted around the neighborhood. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers helped with the search. However, after Gabriella turned the corner and left her sister behind, no one saw her again. Gabriella Verol was born in Argentina in 1998 to Bolivian parents. Her parents separated when she was 6 years old. After her parents separated, Gabriella lived with her mother, Liliana Cham, and later started calling another man, Cesar Garcia, her father. He became her stepfather. Sunilda and other relatives from Liliana's family also lived in the same house. Life at home was difficult. The family made great efforts to create a stable home and meet their basic needs, but the atmosphere was often tense and arguments happened frequently. Gabriella frequently had stressful encounters with her grandmother, and their arguments were much more heated than typical family disputes. The adults were emotionally distant and didn't understand her, which constantly made her feel under pressure. During her teenage years, Gabriella faced the typical challenges of growing up. However, living in a home without personal space or privacy made these difficulties even harder for her. She didn't have a good place to rest or study. She dreamed of living with her biological father, who lived apart from her with another family. Pero ese deseo nunca se cumplió. Al no mantuvo una comunicación constante y también estaba enfrentando sus propios problemas personales. Eventually, the situation at home became too difficult for Gabriella to handle. She decided to leave, taking her younger sister Sunilda with her. For a time, they stayed at the house of their Aunt Marisol, their father's sister. The two sisters hadn't planned to leave permanently or thought it through carefully, but their leaving was a sign that something was wrong. They stayed at their aunt's house for about a week. Life there was more peaceful and there was less strict adult supervision, but this brief period didn't result in any lasting changes. When Gabriella returned to her mother's house, she once again found herself surrounded by the same pressure and stress she had tried to get away from. Although Gabriella was quiet, she was clearly independent. She wore simple clothes, avoided drawing attention to herself, and stayed away from noisy or boisterous groups. However, she was still ambitious. She often envisioned a future in which she could shape her own life. Unfortunately, her limited resources made it difficult to pursue those dreams. She didn't have a computer or reliable internet access at home. Even basic things like homework required her to walk to the nearest internet cafe. As mentioned before, this demanded extra planning and often led to more stress at home. In addition to these daily difficulties, Gabriella also felt a strong sense of emotional distance. Her opinions were often ignored, and her needs were rarely prioritized. Even within her own family, she felt more like an outsider than a real member. She never openly argued with her mother, Liliana. However, Liliana was always so overwhelmed by her responsibilities that she often didn't notice what her daughter was experiencing. Gabriella's stepfather fulfilled his duties, but they never developed a close relationship. There was always a distance between them. Over the years, All of this made Gabriella feel increasingly isolated. She didn't feel safe at home, and she couldn't see any realistic way to find support or make a change outside of it. Life felt like a cycle she couldn't escape, where any progress depended entirely on her own efforts. At home, there was a shortage of resources, emotional support, and space for her to grow. Her desire for independence was no longer just a normal part of growing up, it became a true necessity. This mindset began to guide her choices and actions over time. Against this emotionally vulnerable but outwardly calm backdrop, a series of events began to unfold. These events would eventually lead to devastating consequences. Esther Quintana, born in 1986, was married to Elizabeth Cham, who is Gabriella's maternal aunt. This marriage made Esther a member of Gabriella's family, and they frequently saw each other, as they lived in the same household. For a long time, no one in the family had any concerns about his behavior. They saw him as calm, reliable, and responsible, with a respectable job at the Argentine Prefecture, a federal security agency. He didn't raise any red flags. He stayed out of arguments, helped with household chores, and was present at family gatherings. He was a quiet part of everyday life. He lived with his wife and her family, ate meals with them, took part in family gatherings, and helped with daily chores. To those around him, he seemed like a reliable and discreet adult who handled family matters appropriately and never overstepped his boundaries. Over time, small, isolated incidents began to occur, minor things that didn't seem concerning at first, such as a strange remark or an odd situation. There was no single event, but these details gradually changed how people saw him. After he and Elizabeth separated, Esther left the family home. He moved into a low-cost boarding house near the area where his family still lived. At the time, his relatives thought this was simply the usual thing to do after a marriage ended. This move marked a turning point. It began a new phase in which his behavior slowly changed from neutral to unsettling, even though no one could clearly describe why they felt uneasy. Even though Esther no longer lived with the family, he still kept in touch with them, especially with Gabriella. As time passed, people started noticing that he was spending more and more time alone with her. These meetings took place outside the home, in neutral locations. Neighbors who witnessed these interactions were unsure how to interpret them. One man remembered seeing Gabriella and Esther together on a bus. Gabriella was sitting on Esther's lap while he softly stroked her hair. The man felt uncomfortable watching this but chose not to mention it to the family. He later admitted that he hesitated because he was afraid of causing a scene or damaging family relationships. He decided not to say anything. Other people in the neighborhood reported seeing similar things. Several residents had seen Gabriella near the boarding house where Esther lived. At times, she would go into the building, remain there for an hour or two, and then leave quietly. No one expressed any concern when this happened. Because Esther had once been married to Gabriella's aunt, no one thought their interactions were unusual at first. Their family relationship led people to trust them and not question their meetings. Gabriella never told anyone she visited him, and there was no obvious reason to suspect anything improper was happening. They also had no formal relationship. Esther was not her guardian and had no legal right to be involved in her life. However, he was still somewhat connected to the family, so his actions were considered personal decisions and were not subject to supervision. Gabriella's family didn't keep track of where she was, believing she was either with friends or running errands. It was later revealed that many of their meetings took place at the boarding house where Esther had rented a small room. He often invited Gabriella there, and they kept their visits private. She would arrive by herself and leave without drawing attention. Over time, their relationship changed in ways that went beyond simple familial affection. At the time, however, none of the adults realized how deep their connection had become. Even after his marriage to Elizabeth ended, Gabriella continued to seek contact with him. She never talked about what happened during those visits or shared any details with anyone. Only after she disappeared did people begin to understand the whole story, the clues they had previously missed. At first, there was no clear indication that Gabriella had any reason to keep secrets. She seemed calm and friendly around her relatives, but it later became clear that her relationship with Nestor was something she could not discuss openly. Reportedly, their connection began when Gabriella was just 13. At that point, Nestor was already a grown man, employed in a federal security role and married to her maternal aunt, which made the situation even more troubling. He was not just a stranger, he was a trusted adult in her home, connected to her family, and seen as safe by everyone around her. The first details of this story began to emerge when the investigation started. Friends who had never shown much interest in Gabriella's personal life began to comment. Several people admitted that they had suspected for years that something was wrong between her and Nestor. Some recalled seeing him repeatedly near Gabriella's school, offering her rides or finding reasons to be there. At first, his actions appeared to be motivated by concern, but over time they became more obsessive. The way he behaved was not what you would normally expect from a family member. He monitored her social life, tracked whom she spoke to, and showed signs of jealousy. Gabriella tried to maintain normal friendships, but Nestor's influence made her feel increasingly restricted. People close to her said that he constantly tried to contact her, often calling her repeatedly if she didn't answer immediately. Those who witnessed how urgently he needed to know her whereabouts at all times recognized this as a warning sign. In later messages used as evidence, he accused her of being distant, demanded explanations for her actions, and insisted that she account for how she spent her time when she wasn't with him. These were not isolated incidents, they formed a consistent pattern of controlling and obsessive behavior. Classmates remembered times when Gabriella would only attend events if he gave her permission. Initially, it appeared as if she was simply dealing with strict family rules or a difficult home situation. No one realized that the true reason was the pressure from an adult man who maintained a controlling environment around her. A close friend later recalled that Gabriella had once confided in her, saying she hadn't felt free in a long time and asking her to keep it a secret. At the time, it seemed like something typical a teenager might say. Later, those words would take on much deeper significance. Through the voice messages Nestor sent Gabriella, investigators made a disturbing discovery: he saw her as someone he possessed. In the recordings, his tone shifted between pleading and demanding. He accused her of cheating, doubted her honesty, and repeatedly insisted that she prove her loyalty. When Gabriella began spending time with someone her own age, Nestor started to act increasingly hostile. He made it clear that he could not tolerate her being close to anyone else, not even her friends. The investigation found that this caused tensions between them to escalate even further during that period. As Gabriella grew more distant, Nestor intensified his efforts to regain control. Meanwhile, her friends noticed that Gabriella's emotional well-being was deteriorating. She became increasingly anxious and withdrawn, and she stopped talking about her future. When she tried to leave Nestor, he responded by ramping up his manipulation. He pressured her psychologically, used emotional blackmail, made threats, and tried to make her feel guilty. Relatives living nearby had no idea this was happening. As investigators examined his actions more closely, a clear pattern emerged. He not only violated personal boundaries, but also purposely created a relationship of dependence by taking advantage of his age, his authority, and the trust the family placed in him. Gabriella's friends later confessed that, while they sensed something was wrong, they did not realize the seriousness of the situation. She remained silent out of fear, shame, and the conviction that no one would believe her if she told the truth. This silence allowed Nestor to maintain control over her for years. Gabriella grew up in a home without adequate support, which left her vulnerable. A man, initially only a relative, entered her life and gradually became a dominant presence from whom she could not escape. This situation paved the way for the tragedy that followed. After Gabriella went missing, the police launched an initial investigation. They questioned her sister, her mother, the young man she was dating, and several other acquaintances. Officers began searching the neighborhood and spoke with residents living within a few blocks of where Gabriella was last seen with her sister. Several witnesses reported seeing her later that evening walking down the street with a man. One witness specifically remembered seeing them heading toward the boarding house. Investigators believe that, given the time and place, Gabriella may have intentionally gone there. Meanwhile, some of Gabriella's friends, previously too afraid to speak up, began providing information. As more evidence was gathered, it became clear that Gabriella's disappearance was not accidental. There were no signs that she had run away or made a sudden decision to leave. She left without taking any belongings or informing anyone of her plans. After Nestor Quintana was identified as a person of interest, authorities brought him in for questioning. Initially, he appeared confident. He claimed he had not been in contact with the family for a long time, that he no longer knew anything about Gabriella's life, and that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. He explained that he stayed out of family matters because he and Elizabeth were divorced. At first, his answers seemed consistent. However, investigators soon found several contradictions. Neighbors and other residents reported seeing Nestor still meeting with Gabriella. Witnesses often saw them together near the boarding house, and her friends stated he behaved in a controlling manner, evidence that directly contradicted his previous statements. The investigators intensified their questioning. Nestor was summoned for additional interviews, and with each session, he grew less confident. He began muddling the timeline, changing his story, and avoiding direct questions. Even those who had initially believed he was not involved began to have doubts. The situation shifted noticeably a few days after the investigation gained momentum. Nestor arrived at the police station without prior notice and asked to speak with an officer. This time, he admitted to having had contact with Gabriella and claimed to know where she was. Then he made a confession that changed the whole investigation. He stated that, as on previous occasions, he met with Gabriella on the evening of July 29th. According to him, they had an argument that night. Nestor said the argument escalated and, during the struggle, he lost control and accidentally killed Gabriella by strangling her. He revealed the precise location of her body, explaining that he had hidden it in his room at the boarding house, wrapped in bed sheets and plastic. He claimed that he had acted impulsively during an emotional breakdown and had not planned the act in advance. Police quickly proceeded to the location he mentioned. There, in the room he had rented, investigators discovered Gabriella's body. It was carefully wrapped in several layers of fabric and plastic bags and placed in the corner of the room. Forensic specialists arrived at the scene, determining that the body had been in the room for several days. However, because the room was sealed, decomposition had been limited. Investigators collected all nearby items for forensic examination. An initial autopsy determined that the cause of death was manual strangulation. No signs of sexual assault were found, so investigators ruled out such a motive. However, the main question remained unanswered. If the motive was not sexual assault, what provoked such a violent reaction? Some believe the act resulted from long-term emotional stress, jealousy, and an adult's inability to accept Gabriella's growing independence. Only further interviews and psychological assessments could confirm whether this theory was correct. The authorities informed Gabriella's family of Nestor's confession. The shock was immense. Her mother, stepfather, and other relatives could not believe that someone they had lived with was capable of such an act. Nestor, once regarded as a caring uncle, had now admitted to causing her death. For many people, the news was more than just devastating. It completely destroyed their trust in those closest to them. Cesar Garcia, Gabriella's stepfather, told reporters that he was struggling to understand what had happened. He said that Nestor had never acted suspiciously and was always seen as a trustworthy, ordinary family member. Gabriella's sister, Sunsilda, did not make any public statements and remained in shock. Their mother was so overwhelmed by emotion that she burst into tears. The family's grief was made even worse by a profound sense of betrayal. Although Nestor confessed, the investigation continued. Law enforcement needed to confirm whether his statements were true and to ensure he was not withholding any other information. His claim that his actions were caused by an emotional outburst was questionable, especially since he had carefully concealed the body. Investigators also looked into whether Nestor was trying to minimize his role in order to receive a reduced sentence. This issue became part of the case as it proceeded to trial. After Gabriella's body was found and a confession was made, Nestor Quintana's case entered the formal criminal investigation stage, and he was officially charged. However, during the very first court hearing, the situation changed unexpectedly when Nestor suddenly retracted his confession. He stated that the police had pressured him, used psychological coercion, and had not properly informed him of his rights. This new statement formed the basis of his defense strategy. Nestor's lawyer promptly took action to dispute all evidence that had been gathered from the confession. He claimed that the boarding house was searched illegally because there was no valid warrant. The defense also requested the exclusion of text messages, voice recordings, and witness testimonies that were collected before a lawyer was present. They argued that Nestor was mentally unstable at the time and could not understand the consequences of his words. Prosecutors remained resolute. The lead attorney stressed that Nestor's confession was both voluntary and detailed. He also pointed out that Nestor provided exact directions to where Gabriella's body was found, arguing that such specific information could not have been a coincidence. Furthermore, evidence was collected that revealed a long-term pattern of control by the accused over Gabriella, including indications of psychological manipulation and jealousy. A key piece of evidence was finding Nestor's DNA under Gabriella's fingernails, which clearly showed there had been a physical struggle. Several witnesses testified in court. Gabriella's friends spoke about the emotional distress she experienced in the months before she disappeared, describing how Nestor tried to control her, limited her social interactions, and put her under significant emotional pressure. During the proceedings, a message was read aloud in which Nestor made threats. The content had a significant impact on the jury, prompting the defense to adjust its strategy. They described Nestor as someone who was emotionally unstable and acted impulsively due to extreme stress. They stated that his relationship with Gabriella was mutual but unofficial, and that what happened was not premeditated. These claims angered Gabriella's family. Her stepfather, in particular, spoke out after several hearings, saying that attempts to defend the accused were disrespectful to Gabriella's memory. During the trial, Gabriella's mother, Liliana, remained composed and attended every session. The family was clear and united in saying that this was not a domestic dispute. It was a betrayal that ended a life already controlled and suppressed. Their lawyers argued that this was not only a breach of trust, but Nestor's position as a family member made it even worse. The prosecution requested the harshest penalty, life in prison, because of the seriousness of the crime. They pointed to the close family relationship between those involved, the long-term psychological manipulation, and the deliberate effort to conceal the body. Once both sides gave their closing arguments, the jury was sent out to deliberate and make their decision. Tension filled the courtroom. Gabriella's family sat quietly, anxiously awaiting the verdict. When the jury returned, the foreperson announced the decision: guilty of first-degree murder, with aggravating factors due to the family relationship and gender-based violence. The judge delivered the sentence without delay. Nestor Quintana was sentenced to life imprisonment. The court dismissed the defense's argument that the confession was coerced, noting that it contained detailed information and was supported by physical evidence. The fact that there had also been long-term psychological control made the charges even more serious. Nestor remained expressionless as the verdict was announced. His lawyers sat in silence, staring at the floor. Across the courtroom, Gabriella's mother began to cry, and her husband held her in his arms. This was not a victory, but a painful farewell. Justice had been served, yet their daughter was lost forever. Magdalena Aguilar Romero, a vibrant young woman with great potential, repeatedly sought help to protect herself from her abusive ex-husband. Despite her persistent pleas for safety, she received no response. Magdalena, also known as Magda Aguilar Romero, later took on the last name Arciniega after her marriage. She was born on November 18, 1990, in Tasca del Arcon, a mining town in Guerrero, southwestern Mexico. As the youngest of 3 siblings and the only daughter of their family, she was raised in a challenging environment. Her father worked in a local silver mine, which was a demanding and hazardous job. Despite the health and safety risks, his work provided a steady income to support their large family. Her mother was a stay-at-home mom who focused on raising her 3 children and managing the household. With her husband's reliable income, the family always had what they needed. While they weren't rich, they lived in a spacious and comfortable home. Their sons and Magdalena went to good schools. They participated in sports and other activities. By the mid-1990s, they bought their first car. Magdalena's parents and older brothers cherished, pampered her. She was smart, kind, and sociable. She excelled in school. In middle school, she developed a strong interest in biology and anatomy. Initially, Magdalena aspired to become a cardiologist, but in high school, her focus shifted to nutrition, healthy eating, and wellness. She decided to pursue a career in this area to help people facing health issues related to their diet and eating habits. When Magdalena told her family about her plans, they fully supported her. As a dedicated student, she easily gained admission to a top university to study nutrition. She was determined to become an expert in her field. Instead of moving into the dorms, Magdalena chose to live at home with her family, commuting to university by bus, despite the nearly hour-long journey each way. She still managed to keep up with her sports activities and attended dance classes. Her intense focus on her studies left little time for a personal life, but everything changed in 2011. That year, 20-year-old Magdalena met 35-year-old Cesar Gomez Arciniega, who also hailed from Tosca del Arcon. Cesar owned a successful bar that was a beloved spot in the neighborhood. Locals frequented it to relax after work, share stories, enjoy delicious food, and drink what many considered the best beer in town. Initially, Magdalena ignored the advances and romantic gestures from the older man, Cesar. However, he was persistent. He proved to be intelligent, well-read, and genuinely engaging. He wooed her with poetry, flowers, meaningful gifts. Eventually, she found him charming, succumbed to his attention. Their relationship progressed rapidly. At first, Cesar appeared reliable and mature, someone she could envision a future with. Shortly after they started dating, Magdalena found out she was pregnant. This news shocked her, but Cesar was thrilled. He promptly expressed his desire to marry her. Magdalena agreed to his proposal. Both her family and Cesar's relatives supported the marriage, with no objections or obstacles to their union. In 2011, they officially tied the knot in a simple ceremony at a local chapel, attended by only close relatives and a few friends. After the wedding, Magdalena moved into Cesar's home, which was located in the same building as his bar. At that time, she was in her 3rd year of college, but with a baby on the way and the responsibilities of being a newlywed, she chose to pause her studies to focus on her expanding family. Cesar supported this decision. He was thrilled to have his young wife close by. With a steady income from the family business, Magdalena didn't have to work and had everything she needed. She adjusted to domestic life. Soon they welcomed their first son. Less than a year later, Magdalena discovered she was expecting again. In the summer of 2013, she gave birth to their second son. Things began to change in early 2014 when Magdalena decided to go back to school to complete her degree. This decision led to strong opposition from her husband, Cesar, who insisted she should wait a few more years. He argued that their young sons needed their mother at home full-time. However, Magdalena was eager to return to her studies, especially since her parents were willing to help take care of the boys. They fully supported her ambition to finish her education. Magdalena quickly adjusted to being a student again, but Cesar reacted negatively. He became increasingly jealous and controlling, wanting to know her whereabouts at all times and often starting arguments over minor issues. Initially, Magdalena thought his behavior would improve, but instead, it only escalated. Cesar had developed an overwhelming need to control everything during their nearly 3.5 years of marriage. Under the pretense of acting in her best interests, he gradually isolated Magdalena from her friends and family. Their marriage occurred just a few months after they met when she was already pregnant, leaving her with little time or energy to socialize. After the births of their 2 sons in quick succession, she became even more detached from the outside world. Now that she had returned to school, Magdalena was beginning to rebuild her social life. She reconnected with old friends, made new ones, and started visiting her parents regularly, who were excited to spend time with their grandsons. Cesar began to check Magdalena's phone every day, monitor her social media accounts, and watch her closely. His jealousy intensified, leading him to become unjustly suspicious and accuse her of things she had never done. He forbade her from wearing makeup or perfume, wouldn't allow her to wear heels, even started choosing her clothes for her. To avoid fights, Magdalena reluctantly accepted his demands, but that wasn't enough for Cesar. Eventually, he issued an ultimatum: she could no longer go to college. However, Magdalena was determined not to give up on her dreams of becoming a certified nutritionist, especially when she had just over a year left until graduation. This situation turned her life into a daily struggle, as Cesar continued to impose new restrictions and rules to control her actions. By spring 2014, after ongoing pressure and emotional manipulation, Magdalena had to pause her education again. Influenced by him, she stopped communicating with her friends, even her relatives. She rarely left her house and completely stopped visiting her parents. Her parents grew suspicious when Magdalena missed a family celebration, something she had always attended. Her excuse was vague: she said she was swamped with housework. A month later, she also missed her grandmother's birthday and her parents' wedding anniversary. During phone calls with her mother, Magdalena seemed distant. She gave short answers, avoided direct questions, as if someone was listening nearby. Once lively, cheerful, she had become withdrawn. She stopped allowing family visits and made excuses whenever someone wanted to come over. One day, her older brother visited unexpectedly and was shocked by what he saw. Magdalena looked completely different. She had lost significant weight, seemed fearful and exhausted. She neglected her own well-being, flinched at the smallest noises. It turned out that Cesar had been taking her phone away and only let her make calls when he was around. He had broken her spirit, even started showing aggression in front of their young sons. Despite this, when her older brother offered to take them back to their parents' home, Magdalena refused. She insisted that she would manage on her own. Her brother couldn't remain silent about what he had witnessed. He informed their parents everything, and together they began discussing how to help Magdalena. However, they struggled to communicate with her freely because Cesar was always nearby. He treated her like property, someone he could control entirely, and he had no intention of letting her go. In August 2014, after yet another episode of aggression, Magdalena reached her breaking point. Once Cesar left to run an errand, she discreetly contacted her brother, asked for his help to escape. She quickly packed only essential items and documents, gathered her children, and sneaked out through the back door to avoid running into Cesar's mother, who lived with them. Despite witnessing the abuse, her mother-in-law had always supported her son. The brother took Magdalena and the boys to their parents' house. As expected, Cesar became very angry when he learned that his wife had left with their children. He went to his in-laws' home, demanding Magdalena return, but her father and brothers prevented him from entering, threatened to call the police if he didn't leave right away. The next few months were like a nightmare for Magdalena and her sons. They only left the house when accompanied by her father or brothers because they were afraid Cesar might try to kidnap them. Magdalena reached out to the local authorities for protection from her partner's harassment, but the police did not consider her situation to be a serious threat and denied her request for help. A month after moving out, Magdalena decided to file for divorce. At that point, Cesar changed his approach. He started apologizing and begging her to return, insisting he had changed and would never harm her again, while expressing his love for her. However, Magdalena didn't believe him. She knew him well enough to see that he was just trying to manipulate her again. For a while, he attempted to persuade her to come back, but when he realized she was not going to return, he resorted to threats, emotional pressure. Magdalena often felt anxious, constantly checking her surroundings in fear that he might appear unexpectedly. She visited the police twice more in hopes of obtaining a restraining order against Cesar, but both times her requests were denied. The officers insisted that she was not in any real danger. By early 2015, their divorce was finalized. The court decided that their sons would live with their mother while their father would have visitation rights, including weekends and holidays. At that point, Cesar seemed to have calmed down. He stopped reaching out to his ex-wife and appeared to be moving on with his life. This change allowed Magdalena to finally relax. She returned to college, earned her degree, soon found a good job at a private clinic in her field. Surrounded by friends and family, she began to thrive, earning a stable income and making plans for her future. Nearly 3 years had gone by since the divorce. Cesar no longer attempted to interfere in Magdalena's life. He adhered to the set schedule for picking up and dropping off the boys. Sometimes, Magdalena would go to his house to collect them, but she never went by herself. Her father or one of her brothers always accompanied her. Although Cesar tried to be friendly, Magdalena never felt completely safe around him. Deep down, she knew she could never trust him again. The years she spent living with him, filled with emotional and physical abuse, had left a lasting impact. On January 13, 2018, the boys were with their father. The Romero family was supposed to attend a memorial service at a local church for a recently deceased relative that day. Magdalena informed her mother that she would be late because Cesar, the boys' father, had refused to take them to the church. She arranged to pick them up herself and agreed to meet Cesar at a park near his house. After waiting for about 30 minutes, Cesar called to inform her that he had a sudden errand and had left the boys with his mother, who was unwell and unable to bring them to the park. With no other option, Magdalena decided to go directly to her former mother-in-law's house. While on her way, she called her mother to explain the situation and assured her she would arrive at the church within 30 minutes with the boys. That was the last time her mother heard from her daughter. Magdalena never arrived at the church. Her phone first went unanswered and then was turned off completely. Concerned about Magdalena, her parents started contacting her friends, but no one had seen her. Trying to reach Cesar also yielded no results. That night, filled with increasing worry, the Romeros went to the police to report Magdalena as missing. However, the officers did not take their concern seriously. They pointed out that Magdalena was an adult and not required to check in regularly, adding that it had only been a few hours since anyone had last heard from her. The following day, the police again declined to start a formal search for the same reasons. Magdalena's parents took action, reaching out to everyone they knew for help. They quickly informed relatives and friends, who joined the search for her. News of Magdalena's disappearance spread rapidly on social media, with many sharing her and her son's photos, urging anyone with information to speak up. Flyers were put up throughout the town and on utility poles. When her parents visited Cesar's house, he refused to let them in. He expressed worry about Magdalena and the boys being missing, but he falsely claimed she had taken them and mentioned visiting someone. In reality, Magdalena had told her mother she was going to pick up the boys from Cesar's house to take them to church. The Romeros soon realized something was wrong and suspected that Cesar was not telling the truth. They approached the police again, but the authorities still would not open a missing persons case. They also refused to question Cesar or search his home, claiming there was no reason to do so. Feeling hopeless, Magdalena's parents kept searching on their own for over a week. As their fear and frustration increased, they began to organize public demonstrations to raise awareness about the case and pressure the authorities to act. Eventually, these efforts started to yield results. A neighbor of Cesar contacted the police to report that the boys were at their father's house. Other witnesses later stated they had seen Magdalena entering Cesar's home on the day she disappeared, but no one saw her leave. The public outcry from the Romero family eventually compelled law enforcement to take action. On January 22, 2018, a search warrant was issued for Cesar's residence. What investigators found inside was shocking. The police said that Romero's legs and arms were found inside a pot on the stove, while her cooked pelvis was discovered in a bag near the stove. The rest of her body was found in a nearby refrigerator. Cesar and his mother were caught off guard by the arrival of the police and had not cleaned the area beforehand. The officers brought in Magdalena's parents to identify her remains. The state of her body was distressing, but her parents quickly recognized their daughter. The shock was overwhelming for her mother, and she needed immediate medical help. A forensic examination revealed that Magdalena had suffered severe beatings before her death, which was caused by mechanical asphyxiation. She had been strangled. The most distressing detail that came to light later was that their sons, only 6 and 4.5 years old at the time, had been inside the house throughout the entire incident and witnessed everything. The violent attack on their mother occurred right in front of them. Sadly, they became important witnesses in the subsequent court case. Even though they were young and didn't fully understand what had happened, the older son later told investigators that he saw his father hitting and choking his mother as she screamed, tried to escape. He remembered how Cesar dragged her into the kitchen while their grandmother tried to keep the boys from coming in. The older boy disobeyed and peeked inside, only to see something terrifying. Cesar quickly became the main suspect. However, when the police arrived, they only found his mother and the boys at the house. Cesar had somehow escaped just hours before the search, almost as if he knew the authorities were coming. He took as much cash as he could and disappeared. That same day, his mother was arrested and taken to jail to await trial. She remained calm, even indifferent, when confronted by the police. She did not deny her role in the incidents involving her former daughter-in-law and showed no signs of remorse. Cesar's mother had always been aware of how her son treated his wife, but she consistently sided with Cesar. The investigation showed that while she didn't directly commit the crime, she was aware of her son's plans. She helped bring Magdalena to their home and concealing the evidence. Detectives were particularly disturbed by one aspect of the case: some body parts were cooked into a thick stew. Cesar's mother could not provide a clear explanation for these actions. During the trial, Magdalena's sons testified against Cesar's mothers, as they had witnessed the traumatic events involving their mother. The older boy had sneaked into the kitchen and saw hands boiling in a pot, along with his mother's head in the freezer. The trauma from these experiences was profound, requiring extensive therapy for the boys to start healing and to overcome their nightmares. In November 2019, the court found Cesar's mother guilty of concealment of evidence. Throughout the proceedings, she never expressed any remorse for her actions. The main suspect, Cesar, was the focus of a nationwide manhunt, but authorities could not locate him right after the incident. His mother said she did not know where he had gone. Despite significant media attention, public protests calling for justice, and extensive searches, Cesar remained missing. Authorities searched for him for over 4 years, both in Mexico and internationally, even enlisting Interpol's help, but all leads eventually went cold. In early July 2022, an unexpected incident occurred in Tijuana, a border city, when a bar fight broke out between 2 drunk patrons. The police arrested both men, one of whom was identified as Massimo Herrera Garcia. However, once at the police station, fingerprint analysis revealed he was actually Cesar Gomez Arciniega, a wanted fugitive who had been living under a false identity to escape capture. His intoxicated and aggressive behavior led to his arrest. After being identified, he was sent back to his hometown to await trial. He stalled the legal process by frequently changing attorneys, delaying the trial until fall 2023. By that time, Magdalena's sons had grown older and could better articulate their experiences. They testified against their father. In November 2023, Cesar was convicted of the premeditated and brutal murder of his ex-wife. The court deemed the crime as gender-based, recognizing that it stemmed from years of accumulated desire for revenge after their divorce. He received a sentence of 55 years in prison without the chance for parole. Magdalena's sons were then placed in the care of their maternal grandparents, who had worked tirelessly to seek justice for their mother. Michelle Rivera was born on November 18, 1969, as the 4th of 7 children in her family. She grew up in a small village in the Philippines, where her family struggled with poverty. Her parents could barely provide for their children. From a young age, Michelle was known for her beauty, intelligence, and kindness. She helped her mother with household chores, took care of her younger siblings. Her parents emphasized the importance of education for success, so Michelle focused diligently on her studies. When she turned 16, she moved to attend college for a degree in business administration. Unfortunately, her parents could not afford her tuition, and after the first semester, she had to drop out. Instead of returning home, Michelle stayed with her aunt, who lived near a U.S. naval base. There, she worked at a clothing store and learned English, hoping to eventually move to the United States. During this time, she met Americans for the first time, which fueled her dream of immigrating to the U.S. for a better life. At the age of 18, she reached out to a dating agency that connected her with men from the United States. This pursuit of a husband overseas introduced her to Jonathan Nice. Jonathan was born in 1950. He was the eldest of 4 sons in a deeply religious Catholic family. Although he was quiet and reserved, he had a unique perspective on life. He was also quite creative, with a passion for writing stories and poems. In 1957, the Nice family moved to a bigger house in Collegeville, Pennsylvania, after Jonathan's father got a better-paying job. Jonathan was very good at mathematics and the natural sciences, but he had trouble making friends, especially with girls. He started attending Temple University in Philadelphia in 1968. After 8 years, he earned a bachelor's degree, and 2 years later, he completed a master's degree. By 1983, he had received his doctorate, began working on his dissertation in Los Angeles. After successfully defending his thesis, he found a job at East Carolina University in Greenville by 1988. Ambitious Jonathan became a professor of medical sciences. However, he faced challenges in his personal life. His first marriage to a woman of a different faith ended partly because of their religious differences. Despite this, Jonathan remained hopeful and continued to seek new love. In 1988, Michelle got her first letter from him. He introduced himself as a successful and wealthy professor. The accompanying photo showed him as young, tall, and handsome, with blonde hair. What caught Michelle's attention the most was that he was American. Excited, she replied to his letters, sharing details about herself and her dreams. Over the next few months, they developed a romantic relationship, sending letters, postcards, and photos to each other, even started making phone calls. In October 1989, Jonathan shared his feelings for Michelle, and shortly after, they decided to meet in person. By May 1990, he announced that he had purchased a plane ticket to the Philippines for their wedding. Michelle was excited about this meeting but was taken aback when they finally met, as Jonathan looked quite different from the young man in the photo. He was an overweight, older man with medium-length blonde hair, appearing much older than his actual age. Despite her surprise, Michelle kept her feelings hidden, and they spent the next 2 days together. She later confessed that she had doubts about the wedding from the start, not only because he didn't resemble the photo, but also because some uncomfortable truths were becoming clear. However, after spending time together, she began to feel attached to him. Jonathan had changed his birth date on his passport to make himself younger. His marriage certificate stated that he was born on May 26, 1958, which suggested he was 32, but in reality, he was 40 years old. 21-year-old Michelle felt uncertain about her decision, but her wish to move to the United States was stronger. After their marriage was registered, Jonathan went back to the U.S., leaving Michelle in the Philippines to sort out her American visa. Upon returning, he kept their marriage a secret from everyone, including his parents and brothers, acting as if nothing had happened. During this time, he attended a cancer conference in Hawaii and also traveled to the Philippines, where he was supposed to give lectures. People assumed he was just on a business trip. Meanwhile, Jonathan opened a bank account for Michelle and sent money to support her family. He also bought them a new house in the Philippines. However, by winter, Michelle had still not moved in with her husband. Her visa wouldn't be ready until the end of March the following year. Jonathan then bought Michelle a one-way ticket to California for their honeymoon. In April 1991, Michelle left her family to fly to California. The deception continued. Jonathan was embarrassed about how he met Michelle through correspondence in the Philippines, so he concocted a story about falling in love at first sight during a conference there. He maintained this lie for years, and Michelle supported it because she was not proud of her past either. After they returned to New Jersey, Jonathan rented an apartment for them, and a few months later, Michelle became pregnant. They welcomed their first child, Alex. Both parents doted on him. Jonathan devoted all his free time to his son, and Michelle frequently sent pictures to her parents. Michelle became pregnant again in early 1993, and on November, she gave birth to their second son, Trevor. During this time, Jonathan collaborated with other experts to enhance asthma medications. In the spring of 1995, Jonathan left the university to start his own pharmaceutical company. He began promoting a new drug, claiming it had been tested on animals and had no side effects. Slowly, the money started coming in. Those who worked with Jonathan recognized that he was, at best, overstating the truth. However, he had a talent for presenting things in a way that made others believe him. Small falsehoods turned into a larger deception. Jonathan appeared convincing and continued to attract investments for drug development. The business was expanding, and the drug trials seemed very promising, at least on paper. By the end of 2000, Jonathan was getting ready for drug trials in London. Their relationship seemed strong, they were enjoying life together. They had a daughter, Samantha, and lived in a spacious new house in an upscale neighborhood of Hopewell Township, New Jersey, a charming town with a population of 4,000, situated on an old horse farm. However, Jonathan felt the property wasn't green enough, so in 2001, he hired a gardener named Miguel de Jesus. Miguel was a 31-year-old Puerto Rican with years of experience in landscape design and great references. He completed the landscaping for their home at a cost of $50,000. Jonathan invested generously in the project. Michelle, who did not have a job and spent most of her time at home, interacted with Miguel more frequently than Jonathan did, leading to a mutual attraction between them. By spring 2002, the business started facing issues. Jonathan had to cut his staff down to 12 employees. The company invested around $40 million in different studies, but they yielded no convincing results. Jonathan felt mounting pressure from investors, and funding for his projects was halted. Desperate for cash, he took out a $200,000 loan against his home. These financial struggles began to take a toll on his marriage. During this time, Michelle confided in a friend that she wanted a divorce. In the summer of 2002, her father came to visit the nice family and intended to stay for a while to spend time with his daughter and grandchildren. He often spent months with them, cooking Filipino dishes. During this visit, he observed firsthand the deterioration of the marriage. Jonathan was drinking heavily, and the couple argued almost daily. The parents was revealed that Jonathan had lied about his age, which shocked everyone, including Michelle. The troubled state of their marriage continued to decline. She made the decision to get a divorce, but she knew it would require careful planning. The financial situation was entirely in Jonathan's hands, leaving Michelle feeling trapped. She needed help to overcome this challenge. That's why Miguel de Jesus appeared to be a promising choice. He had lived in the US for 14 years, worked in landscape design, and had a steady job with regular clients. Miguel had been married for 5 years following his previous divorce. He had not paid alimony and had accumulated significant debt. He was also hiding because a warrant had been issued to freeze his accounts. To conceal his identity, he used a fake ID with a different name. Michelle started giving him expensive gifts to show her affection. A secret relationship formed between them. As tensions rose, Michelle and Jonathan grew more distant. In January 2003, Michelle's friend became worried when she couldn't reach her by phone, fearing something was wrong. She was aware that Jonathan had problems with alcohol, was facing significant financial struggles, and that a divorce was imminent. Concerned that he might have harmed Michelle, the friend decided to visit their house to check on her. However, Michelle was hesitant to talk about her husband and avoided discussing their relationship altogether. Eventually, the friend left. In the following months, the friend made several attempts to reach out to Michelle, but each effort failed. It appeared that Michelle was intentionally avoiding everyone. She slowly withdrew from her family and friends and did not return their calls. In February 2003, Michelle traveled to the Philippines to see her family, with Jonathan joining her. Initially, everything seemed to be going well, but soon the effects of her alcohol abuse became evident, leading to daily arguments between them. A group of investors started talks to purchase Jonathan Nice's company, which resulted in him facing intense pressure and eventually losing his CEO position. In March 2003, even with his financial difficulties, Jonathan maintained a lavish lifestyle, with monthly mortgage payments of around $6,500. He continued to hide his financial issues from everyone, even planned to launch a new business. He focused on research to create drugs aimed at preventing lung cancer in smokers. He rarely left his home, dedicated himself to his research, and even authored a book of poems for children. This situation made it difficult for Michelle to meet her lover, Miguel. As her anxiety grew, she started coming up with various excuses to secretly maintain her affair. On June 26, 2003, Miguel's wife found out about his affair and kicked him out of their home. Meanwhile, Jonathan was aware of his wife's infidelity but didn't show it at first. On July 10, Jonathan went to the police to report that a man had called him twice, demanding $500,000 in exchange for video and audio recordings of intimate moments with his wife, Michelle. Jonathan recognized the caller's voice as Miguel. On July 23, Jonathan called Miguel and threatened him, insisting that he should never approach Michelle again. Miguel, however, denied having any connection with Michelle. After these events, Michelle lost access to her bank account. Jonathan became angry and restricted her funds, providing only $300 a month for groceries. This situation led Michelle into deep despair, and she stopped sending money to her relatives in the Philippines. When their youngest daughter turned 5, Michelle enrolled her daughter in kindergarten. With more free time, she took a part-time job as a consultant in the cosmetics department, which gave her a sense of financial independence and allowed her to escape her husband's control. To stop his wife from keeping in touch with Miguel, Jonathan went to the police and reported that Miguel had made threats against them. This helped them secure a restraining order against Miguel. During this time, Jonathan faced depression and started consulting a psychiatrist. He received medication that was supposed to help him, but instead, it worsened his emotional state. One day, while at his parents' house, he broke down in tears and admitted that Michelle had a boyfriend, which left him frightened of losing her. In an attempt to regain control, he tried to convince Michelle to quit her job, but she refused to comply. Jonathan launched a perfume company, hoping to work alongside his wife. He planned to replicate the scent of the national flower of the Philippines and believed this venture would bring them financial success, strengthen their marriage, and restore their relationship. However, his possessive behavior worsened the situation. Michelle continued her affairs, did not wear her wedding ring to work. During Thanksgiving, when they met Jonathan's parents, the tension was palpable. They barely communicated or interacted with one another. January 15, 2004, began as a normal day for the family. Schools were closed due to snowfall, keeping the children at home. Michelle went shopping while Jonathan spent time with the younger children. After lunch, Michelle returned home to get ready for her evening shift, leaving around 4 p.m. Jonathan tried to call Michelle several times, but she didn't answer. After her shift ended, CCTV footage showed her leaving the store and walking to her car. At 9:54 p.m., she entered Miguel's car. They rented a motel room for 2 hours, during which Jonathan continued to call Michelle, but she chose not to respond. After they were intimate, they talked for a bit, and Michelle mentioned that she suspected Jonathan was tracking her. Once their time together was over, Michelle got into her car, planning to drive home. At 12:30 a.m., she left the parking lot to drive approximately 15 kilometers home. Meanwhile, Jonathan, unable to sleep, waited outside their home for his wife. Early the next morning, a man was driving on a deserted road in rural New Jersey, heading to a friend's place. While driving, he glanced at a shallow creek where he planned to go fishing later. Suddenly, he spotted a dark car with its engine running, parked oddly on the riverbank with its front wheels partially submerged in the water. He thought little of it, assuming it was likely a local fisherman or deer hunter who had stopped for a reason. So, he continued driving without stopping. About an hour later, the man returned with his friend and noticed the car still in the same spot. This seemed unusual, so he decided to investigate. The engine was running, but the headlights were off. On the passenger side, he discovered blood. Concerned, he called the police. Within an hour, a team of forensic experts and detectives arrived from both the local district and a neighboring one, as violent incidents were rare in this area. It was cordoned off and searched thoroughly, even from the air. At first, it appeared to be an accident. However, the condition of the body contradicted this. The car showed no signs of damage, which was impossible. Additionally, the victim was barefoot, which added to the suspicion that this was a murder made to look like an accident. The car's registration number was verified in the database, revealing that it belonged to Jonathan Nice. Sitting in the driver's seat was Michelle, 34, who had a fractured skull. The injuries appeared too severe to have been caused by an accident, prompting authorities to reconsider. Notably, the driver's seat was pushed all the way back, which was unusual since Michelle was too small to drive comfortably in that position. There was also a suitcase containing women's items wedged under the seat. Large footprints leading from the car to the road indicated that a man had walked away from the vehicle. The snow footprints became a significant piece of evidence in the investigation. At 9:13 a.m., 2 officers arrived at the Nice house to speak with Jonathan. Earlier, around 6:13 a.m., another police officer had responded to an alarm in the garage, but Jonathan was now unaccounted for. The children answered the door. They told the police that their father had left, their mother had gone to work the day before and had not come back. At this point, the detectives realized there were significant issues in Michelle and Jonathan's relationship. They waited for Jonathan, who recounted the events of the previous evening. He had not seen her since 4 p.m., which wasn't surprising due to their family issues. After learning that Michelle was dead, Jonathan was informed of his rights because his family was under suspicion. He shared details about their troubled relationship, his daily routine, and mentioned a gardener who extorted money from him and threatened their family. He appeared indifferent about his wife's death. However, at the end of the meet, he broke down in tears when he asked how to explain her death to their children. The detectives interviewed Michelle's friend, Larissa Seuss. She had no knowledge of any physical violence between the couple but was aware that Michelle was unhappy and wanted to leave her husband. Jonathan did not notify Michelle's family about her death. They learned of it through a newspaper article. Jonathan's father called him after receiving information from the doctor about the accident. A Filipino man had been living with them for several months and witnessed their relationship grow. He suspected that Jonathan might have tampered with the car to cause the accident. The medical examiner's findings revealed the severe violence Michelle experienced. She had 3 deep lacerations on her forehead, exposing her bone. A blunt force injury to the back of her head caused bleeding, but it did not kill her instantly. There was even bloody foam in her lungs, suggesting she survived for a while after the injury. The autopsy report confirmed that she died from blunt force trauma to her head, which resulted in a skull fracture and hemorrhage. When the police interviewed Miguel de Jesus, he quickly called a lawyer. He confessed that he had been in a relationship with Michelle for several months. Miguel provided a detailed account of the last evening he spent with her before her death. He did not appear suspicious and had an alibi. Miguel stated that Michelle had often told him that Jonathan was physically abusing her and had even restrained her to the bed as punishment. As a result, the police secured a search warrant for the Nice family's house. As the investigation continues, Jonathan becomes increasingly suspicious. When detectives came to arrest him, he took almost 10 minutes to answer the door, suggesting he was trying to conceal something. It was later discovered that he had quickly removed the soles from his shoes, cut them into small pieces, and hidden them in various locations around the house, including among some Christmas decorations. The patterns on the soles of the shoes were later matched to evidence found at the crime scene. During his questioning, Jonathan's first comment was about Michelle's infidelity. He still repeated the events from the previous night and the day, admitting that he last saw his wife alive around 4 p.m. as she was getting ready for her job. After she left, he never saw her again. When police raided Nice's home, they found a blood-stained baseball bat and Jonathan's clothes soaked in pink water in the washing machine. Police also found blood in the garage and bloody towels hidden in the chimney. The investigation confirmed that all of the stains were from the victim's blood. When directly asked about the suspicion of killing his wife, Jonathan denied it, claiming he had been framed and attempting to shift the blame to his wife's lover. Over time, he began to show signs of distress. Jonathan later told police that his wife had attacked him in the garage with what he believed was a knife when she got home. According to him, Michelle fell to the floor of the garage, and he accidentally smashed her head into the floor during the struggle that resulted in her death. Afterward, Jonathan placed Michelle in the driver's seat of her car and used an ice pick to operate the accelerator and brake pedals while sitting in the passenger seat. He drove about a mile until he found a creek, then drove off the road and into the water. At that point, he left the car running and walked home. In the garage, authorities discovered cut-out shoe soles hidden throughout, which matched the footprints found at the scene of the accident. Additionally, there was evidence of blood in the garage. The prosecution claimed that Michelle wanted to leave the marriage, but Jonathan could not allow that to happen, so he attacked her. They believed that Jonathan made up a story about Miguel trying to blackmail him with intimate photos, perhaps in an attempt to scare off Miguel and save his marriage. Miguel testified that Jonathan had been aware of his wife's affair for a long time, suggesting that the murder was not a spontaneous act of passion but rather a premeditated one. Miguel also stated that Jonathan had threatened to kill him. Jonathan was desperate to save his marriage and did not want Michelle to leave amicably, which is why he aimed to remove Michelle. The prosecutor believed that Jonathan had been waiting for Michelle to return from seeing her lover that evening to confront her. As soon as she parked the car in the garage, he approached her, sparking an argument. They moved inside the house, where the fight continued, with Michelle stating her desire to leave and quickly packing her belongings. Jonathan eventually realized he had lost his wife after 15 years of marriage and that nothing could change that. When she got into the car with her things, he became furious, pulling her out with such strength that he nearly injured her arm. He then threw her onto the concrete floor and struck her on the back of the head with a bat. Despite being injured, Michelle tried to stand up but was slipping in her own blood. Jonathan continued to slam her head against the concrete. According to the medical examiner, Michelle survived for approximately 10 minutes after being hit before choking on her blood. Jonathan suddenly realized that he had killed Michelle. He placed her body in the driver's seat of the car, gathered up the bloody items, and put them in the trunk. It was about 2 a.m. He pushed the driver's seat back as far as it would go, sat next to her in the driver's seat, and drove out of the garage. Jonathan operated the pedals as if they were her feet, while keeping his hands on the steering wheel over hers. A couple of miles away, he found a narrow part of the river where he planned to drive the car into the water to make it look like an accident. However, he was careless and left behind a significant amount of evidence and footprints leading from the submerged car back to his home. He also forgot to move the driver's seat back into its original position, which further exposed his attempt to stage the scene. At around 3 a.m., Jonathan returned to the garage and started cleaning it thoroughly with paper towels and bleach. By about 6 a.m., he accidentally triggered the alarm, prompting a quick response from the police. In a hurry, he scattered bloody clothes and bloody towel into the chimney. After that, Jonathan went to bed and pretended to be asleep for the rest of the night. Jonathan Nice was charged with first-degree murder and concealment of evidence. His trial started in June 2005. He maintained that he had acted in self-defense. The professor employed a skilled lawyer who argued convincingly that Michelle and her lover had plotted to extort money from Jonathan and had intended to kill him that night. According to the lawyer, Jonathan managed to defend himself, which tragically led to Michelle's death. The defense also highlighted that Jonathan panicked upon realizing he had accidentally killed her. The question still lingered: if Jonathan was acting in self-defense, why didn't he call 911 right away to explain what happened? Why did he feel the need to cover up the incident? The lawyer suggested that Jonathan was afraid of being sent to prison. The defense attorney argued that Jonathan was too intelligent to kill his wife in such an obvious way by causing a head injury. As a brilliant scientist, he could have created a more subtle method to avoid detection, like developing a new poison. The defense attorney was convincing and successfully reduced the charge to manslaughter in a moment of passion. As a result, Jonathan received a lighter sentence of just 8 years. The judge showed leniency because Jonathan had made significant contributions to society, particularly in the battle against a deadly disease. After the verdict, Jonathan said he still loved Michelle and felt regret about how things had ended up. Even though he received a light sentence, an appeal was submitted in 2007, but it was denied. Jonathan's parents, who are U.S. citizens, were given custody of the children, Samantha, Alex, and Trevor, while the parents of Michelle, who are from the Philippines, were not granted custody. On December 5, 2010, Jonathan Nice was released from prison after serving 5 years of his 8-year sentence. He moved in with her parents and reunited with her 3 children. He wrote an e-book titled Under the Color of Law, The Deliberate Conviction of an Innocent Man and the Destruction of a Family, to clear his name. On February 5, 2020, Philly Voice reported that federal authorities had charged Jonathan Nice with selling counterfeit drugs to dog owners whose pets were suffering from terminal cancer. He allegedly falsely claimed that these drugs almost always restore the appetite, spirit, and energy of a cancer-stricken dog. He gave the fake treatments realistic-sounding names, Temexal and Natrosone, and claimed that the Food and Drug Administration funded his research. In reality, the drugs were simply random ingredients mixed together, and the FDA had no involvement with them. According to the Justice Department, the scam netted nearly $1 million from approximately 900 victims. In December 2022, a federal jury convicted Jonathan Nice of wire fraud and interstate transportation of misbranded veterinary drugs. He now faces up to 32 years in prison and a substantial fine. On a lonely road in Morelos, a young woman's body was found. Bystanders quickly called for emergency help. She was lying still, her skin had noticeable bruises. There were no ID or personal belongings nearby to identify her. Ariadna Lopez was born on July 5, 1995, in a challenging neighborhood in Mexico City. Despite having limited resources, she grew up in a loving environment. Her mother raised her and her older brother, Omar Rodriguez. Their father was mostly absent and had little interest in being involved in their lives. In his absence, Omar took on the role of a protector and role model for Ariadna, creating a strong bond that gave her a sense of security knowing she was supported. Ariadna had a warm and friendly personality, which made her well liked by her friends. She easily connected with others and was known for her honesty, helpfulness. During her school years, she formed close friendships, shared dreams about the future. However, her adulthood was marked by tragedy. In 2018, when Ariadna was only 23, her mother was diagnosed with cancer. The illness progressed quickly, and the family soon faced the heart-wrenching loss. The death of her mother affected both Ariadna and Omar deeply. This experience strengthened their relationship, forced Ariadna to grow up quickly, taking charge of her own life. Before her mother's illness, Ariadna started dating a young man, and their relationship progressed quickly. Soon, she discovered she was pregnant. The birth of their son was a significant turning point, but it did not bring long-term stability to their relationship. They realized early that they were not compatible as a couple and decided to part ways. However, they continued to work together to co-parent their son. As a new mother, Ariadna faced various challenges. She had to juggle parenting with the need to find a stable job. Her journey toward financial independence began when she secured a job at a popular bar in Mexico City that catered to affluent clients. This role came with high expectations regarding professionalism and social skills. At the bar, Ariadna learned to interact effectively with diverse people. Despite the stress of the job, she met its challenges by using her charm and strong work ethic. When the global issue struck, Ariadna's life changed dramatically. The bar where she worked closed, and she lost her job. Instead of feeling defeated, Ariadna viewed this as an opportunity to pursue a long-held dream, opening her own beauty salon. This new venture represented her determination to shape her own life. With her experience and a strong network of contacts, she successfully established a business that provided financial security for herself and her son. During this time, Ariadna began a new relationship with a man she felt a strong connection with. This relationship brought her happiness and a sense of stability. She balanced her responsibilities between her son, her business, and her new partner. Although her days were busy, she welcomed each moment with appreciation, eager for the new opportunities that came her way. By the age of 27, Ariadna's life was like a carefully arranged puzzle. Every success and challenge added to the overall picture of her journey. She had faced loss, rebuilt her life from scratch, focused on her son's future, and achieved her independence. However, just as this chapter of her life seemed to be starting on a positive note, it was unfortunately a precursor to something much more troubling. Ariadna met Vanessa Flores through mutual friends at a social event where Ariadna was with her friends. Vanessa made a strong impression. She was young, energetic, and charismatic, easily attracting attention with everyone around her. However, those close to Vanessa often noted that she could be unpredictable. Behind her charm, there were some more difficult aspects to her personality, and her actions sometimes surprised others. Rodel Astudillo Garcia, a middle-aged entrepreneur, often appeared in Vanessa's social group. His name was frequently associated with rumors due to his wealth, influence, and extravagant lifestyle. He was often seen with younger women who wanted to join his circle. There were many whispers about him, including tales of high-profile connections and even suggestions of links to organized groups. However, no one in his social circle could confirm any of these claims. Rodel himself steered clear of direct questions regarding his past or business dealings. His presence garnered both respect and a sense of unease. Ariadna was smart and independent, but she didn't realize how different her new friends were from her usual social circle. Vanessa, eager to impress, often boasted about her connections to influential people, particularly Ratel, whom she claimed could solve problems effortlessly. Gradually, Ariadna began spending more time with this group. Vanessa seemed genuinely intrigued by Ariadna, lavishing attention on her and diligently trying to earn her trust. When Rodel learned about Ariadna from Vanessa, he quickly wanted to meet her. During their first encounter, he surprised her with his attentiveness and charm. His confidence attracted people, including Ariadna. However, behind his polished facade lay a more complicated character. Those who had interacted with him mentioned his manipulative nature. Despite this, Ariadna perceived him as respectful and even kind. Vanessa played an important role in building the connection. She often invited Ariadna to events where Rodel was also present, fostering a welcoming atmosphere. However, as time went on, small warning signs began to emerge. Ariadna's close friends started advising her to be wary of this group. Some knew about Ratel's dubious reputation and Vanessa's unpredictable behavior. They were concerned that this new social circle might carry hidden dangers. Ariadna dismissed her friends' concerns about her new social circle, viewing her friendship with Vanessa as a refreshing escape from everyday stress. It offered her a chance to experience new things. Meanwhile, Rodel tried to win her over by being generous and friendly, inviting her to dinners and parties that felt fun. Even though Ariadna was in a relationship, she continued to keep her friendships and go to social events. Those who knew her said her partner trusted her and had no issues with her socializing. As time went on, Ariadna noticed some changes in her relationships. Vanessa began to call her more often, suggesting outings and making plans that focused on spending time together. At the same time, Rodel was gradually trying to become a more significant part of her life, presenting himself as someone who could always provide help or support. Unknowingly, Ariadna was getting deeper into their dynamic. On October 30th, 2022, Ariadna accepted Vanessa's invitation to spend the evening with friends. They planned to start at a popular restaurant in downtown Mexico City. Vanessa assured her it would be a relaxed evening filled with good food and enjoyable conversation. Roddle was also expected to join them, which made Ariadna feel slightly uncomfortable. Although she had her reservations about him, she didn't want to disappoint Vanessa, so she decided to go. The group met in the evening at Fisher's, a seafood restaurant, the venue known for its upscale atmosphere and stylish decor, which was lively. At their table, the mood was relaxed. Wine and cocktails were being enjoyed, platters of appetizers added to the festive feel of the night. Roddle took the spotlight, sharing stories, proposing toasts, and engaging playfully with the waitstaff. He exuded confidence and made sure everyone noticed him. Vanessa joined in, lightening the mood with jokes and laughter. The rest of the group attempted to keep the upbeat vibe, but Ariadna stood out because she seemed uncomfortable. She frequently checked her phone, responding to messages and looking concerned as she read the screen. She often glanced at Roddle, as if trying to understand unspoken feelings behind his words. Vanessa tried to draw her back into the fun, urging her to relax and have another drink, but Ariadna remained reserved, her demeanor suggesting that something was troubling her more than the lively atmosphere could hide. In evening, Ariadna shared a puzzling message on her social media: "Would you miss me if I disappeared?" This caused concern among her followers. Some thought it was just a joke, but her close friends and colleagues felt it was out of character for her. The message created an unsettling feeling that, at the time, no one understood would be connected to her last hours. As the night went on, the group decided to continue their evening at Roddle's house, a suggestion made by Roddle himself. Vanessa supported the idea, claiming it would be a more relaxed and private setting. Although Ariadna felt uncertain, she eventually agreed after her friends pressured her. The rest of the group followed along, and they all traveled together to Roddle's home in his vehicle. His house was situated in an upscale neighborhood that reflected his public persona. Inside, the decor was sleek and modern, featuring luxurious elements. Upon arrival, the group settled into a spacious living room where music played and drinks were served, allowing the night to unfold. However, Ariadna started to feel increasingly uneasy. She stepped away several times to check her phone, pretending to take calls, which made her seem distant and distracted. Vanessa noticed her behavior and began whispering to Roddle, which only added to the tension in the room. Near midnight, Ariadna expressed her desire to go home because she was tired. Vanessa encouraged her to stay a bit longer, just another half hour. Roddle said nothing, but his lingering gaze on Ariadna made her uneasy. As the night came to a close, the guests began to depart, and Ariadna was among the last to leave. After that evening, no one in the group would see her alive again. On October 31st, the night before the Day of the Dead, Ricardo Calderon and a friend set off on a bike ride south from Mexico City to Tepoztlan, a popular day trip destination. They turned off the road to rest outside the colonial town. That's where they made a grisly discovery: a woman's body in the bushes beneath an overpass, within earshot of passing traffic. She was lying on her back, with her arms spread out, her beige skirt pulled up above her waist, and her right foot clad in a white high-top sneaker. Her hair was braided, and she had no identification or belongings. They quickly contacted the police, who arrived several hours later. While waiting, they took photos of the scene to document details that might assist in identifying the woman. When the police arrived, they secured the area, started gathering evidence. They found visible tire tracks in the dirt and markings that indicated the body had been moved. Forensic specialists observed signs of a struggle, but they couldn't determine the exact cause of death right away. No weapons were discovered, and the body had no obvious injuries that could explain what happened. There were also no documents or personal items to identify her. Hours later, images of the scene began to spread on social media, causing widespread concern. Among those who saw the photos were friends and family of Ariadna. Her father and her brother, Omar, recognized familiar features, including her tattoos. The tattoo reads, Armida, the name of Ariadna's mother. Another is a sunflower, her signature symbol. They feared the worst, so they filed a missing person report and informed the authorities that the woman found might be Ariadna Lopez. Meanwhile, authorities in the state of Morelos began a separate investigation. However, the local police's initial actions faced significant criticism. They mishandled evidence collection, leaving many crucial details at the scene undocumented. This raised serious concerns about the professionalism and integrity of the involved law enforcement. When Ariadna's family came to identify the body, they faced their worst fears. Omar recognized his sister by a tattoo on her shoulder. The shock was overwhelming, especially upon seeing the state of her body, which bore bruises and trauma on her face and arms, indicating some form of violence. In contrast, the police's initial statements were vague and unconvincing. The family responded by calling for justice, demanding a transparent investigation. On the same day, they contacted friends who used social media to help raise awareness. The campaign quickly gained traction, attracting thousands of users. Despite increasing public pressure, the Morelos police continued to believe that the death could have been an accident. They indicated that a final conclusion could only be reached after the forensic report was finished. This position only fueled further suspicion, especially as rumors started to spread that influential individuals might be attempting to cover up the truth. Investigators first interviewed Rodel and Vanessa, the last known people to see Ariadna alive. Their statements provided the initial account of the situation. Rodel stated that after the party, Ariadna chose to leave his house and called a taxi. He described her as a little upset but not overly concerned. He said he walked her to the door, and she left alone. Vanessa supported his story, confirming that Ariadna took a taxi but did not mention her destination. However, inconsistencies in their account quickly surfaced. The main issue was the absence of any confirmed taxi records. Neither Rodel nor Vanessa could provide the contact information for a driver or any evidence to back up their claims. Later, investigators checked several taxi service logs in the area but found no record of Ariadna being picked up that night. Another concern was the inconsistency in Vanessa's story. Her answers changed depending on the questions asked. At first, she claimed that Ariadna left the party on her own. Later, she mentioned that they had an argument, implying that Ariadna might have been emotionally troubled. Ariadna's friends reported to the police that Vanessa contacted them after Ariadna's disappearance, trying to suggest that Ariadna was in a bad state of mind, referring to her vague social media post. This post, made just hours before Ariadna's disappearance, raised concerns for many. While her family and close friends initially viewed it as a joke, investigators began to think it might signal her emotional distress on the night of the party. Additionally, Vanessa's increasingly anxious behavior was alarming. In messages to Ariadna's friends, she appeared hesitant to discuss the events of that night. At one point, she expressed fear of being suspected, though she didn't explain why. These clues led investigators to believe that Vanessa might be hiding important information. The initial investigation into Ariadna's death did not provide a clear explanation of what happened. However, further inquiries by law enforcement and independent experts revealed important evidence. 2 autopsies, surveillance footage, and text messages from the suspects' phones became crucial in piecing together the events. Oriel Carmona, the state's chief prosecutor, told reporters that an autopsy determined Ariadna Lopez died of severe alcohol poisoning. He stated that investigators found no signs of violence. Sitting at the same table, Yasmin Herrera Soto, the chief medical examiner, clarified the findings. The autopsy showed significant bruising but no fatal injuries. According to the autopsy report, none of the 17 fresh wounds on Ariadna's arms, legs, and torso broke the skin or caused external bleeding, and there were no broken bones or signs of assault. In an interview, Pereira noted that there were a pair of bruises on the back of Ariadna's head that caused internal bleeding in her skull, but no brain damage, and that the bruising was consistent with a fall. The cuts on Lopez's forehead were believed to have been caused by insects attacking her while her body was outside. Prosecutors stated that lab tests showed Ariadna's blood alcohol level was 0.498, a level that is 6 times the legal limit for driving in the United States. According to Carmona, Ariadna choked on her own vomit. Nevertheless, her family strongly disputed this finding. Ariadna's family, unsatisfied with the official explanation, requested an independent second autopsy. Under pressure from the public and her relatives, Ariadna's body was sent to a forensic institute in Mexico City. The results of this second examination contradicted the original conclusions. Experts discovered multiple injuries, including head trauma, bruises, and signs of struggle on her arms and legs, suggesting she may have tried to defend herself. These findings indicated that Ariadna's death was not accidental or solely due to alcohol. Consequently, her death was reclassified as the result of violent actions, leading authorities to treat the case as a criminal matter. Security footage from Roddle's apartment building provided crucial evidence in the case. One video shows Roddle early the morning after the party. A bald, bearded man dragged Ariadna Lopez's body, his legs stiff from rigor mortis, through the hallway and down to the garage. He carried the corpse over his right shoulder to the back of a black SUV, then hurried to the driver's seat. Mexico City Mayor Claudia Sheinbaum identified the man as Roddle Astudillo and accused him of driving the body and dumping it near Tepoztlán, a charge prosecutors later said was substantiated based on analysis of his cell phone records. Sheinbaum said Astudillo likely chose to dump the body in neighboring Morelos state because of his relationship with Carmona, the prosecutor she accused of covering up the case. Sheinbaum said that they had tried to blame the victim. He added that never again should a woman's murder be covered up and a woman be defamed and harmed. Meanwhile, Vanessa often told Ariadna's friends that she might have been having emotional difficulties and suggested she could have intentionally disappeared. However, her friends described Ariadna as lively and optimistic, with no known emotional issues. When the second autopsy and surveillance footage, it became evident that the initial theories of an accidental death or voluntary departure from Roddle's home were not valid. The evidence instead indicated a violent act and a conscious attempt to conceal the body. These findings led to legal actions against Roddle and Vanessa, who would soon face charges in court. Vanessa was the first to be arrested. Authorities discovered that she had been in regular contact with Roddle after Ariadna's death, discussing ways to evade legal consequences. Her arrest occurred amid significant media attention. During initial questioning, Vanessa claimed she was not involved in Ariadna's death, but her statements contained numerous contradictions. She asserted that she had gone to bed early on the night of the incident and knew nothing about what happened afterward. However, further investigations disproved this claim. Message logs indicated that she was aware of the situation and had conversed with Roddle about important details. Investigators also found that Vanessa had taken actions to destroy potential evidence, including deleting photos and conversations, trying to distance herself from the aftermath. Realizing the overwhelming evidence against him, Roddle chose to turn himself in. He arrived at the police station with his legal team and claimed he was innocent. He stated that he did not harm Ariadna. Instead, he panicked after finding her unresponsive in his home the morning after the party and attempted to conceal her body, fearing he would be blamed. However, investigators found significant issues with his version of events. First, a second autopsy revealed clear signs of physical trauma, contradicting his assertion that she died without any interference. Second, surveillance footage showed him intentionally carrying her body in a way that suggested he was trying to avoid being seen, which is not typical behavior for someone seeking help. Furthermore, his text messages with Vanessa indicated that they had coordinated their stories and worked to mislead others about what actually happened. During the investigation, alarming new evidence came to light pointing to possible corruption. There were increasing suspicions about a link between Roddle and a prosecutor in Morelos. Notably, the initial autopsy report from that state failed to mention any injuries that suggested violence. Public activists and Ariadna's family accused the prosecutor of abusing their position to protect Roddle, leading to widespread public anger. In response, authorities in Mexico City began a formal review of the prosecutor's actions, while Internal Affairs launched an independent investigation into potential misconduct. Some witnesses alleged that Roddle had ties to criminal groups, which could explain his seeming assurance that he would escape punishment. Nevertheless, both Vanessa and Roddle denied any direct involvement, instead choosing to defend each other, deflect questions. This evasiveness heightened investigators' suspicions and played a significant role in the decision to keep them in temporary custody. The reasons and events of that night prompted a thorough investigation. To find the truth, investigators had to piece together the timeline, analyze physical evidence, and study the actions of everyone at the gathering. Gradually, a clearer understanding started to take shape. Ariadna Lopez arrived at Fisher's, a bustling seafood restaurant in Mexico City, at around 6 p.m. on October 30th, wearing a long beige dress and white high-top sneakers. She hugged both Vanessa and Roddle. The trio, along with 3 others, left the restaurant about an hour later in Roddle's black SUV. All 6 arrived at Roddle's building at around 7:15 p.m. They took the elevator to his apartment. At first glance, everything seemed typical. There was laughter, conversation, and music, but subtle hints indicated something was off. Witnesses and text message analysis showed that Ariadna was unusually quiet and distracted. She often checked her phone, sending messages and answering calls, behavior her friends noted was unlike her during social events. This detail became important in the investigation. Ariadna's messages to a friend revealed her worries about the gathering and discomfort with certain people there. Although Vanessa and Rotel were the hosts, there was noticeable tension between them. Witnesses later noted that Vanessa directed several sharp comments at Ariadna throughout the night. Ariadna, wishing to avoid drama, responded calmly and tried to defuse any potential conflict. As the night progressed and alcohol began to affect everyone, tensions intensified. Vanessa, already emotional, raised her voice multiple times, accusing Ariadna of being disrespectful and unfriendly. No one else at the gathering agreed with these accusations, but the atmosphere became increasingly tense. While Roddle tried to stay neutral, it was evident that he felt uncomfortable with Vanessa's actions. The turning point occurred the next morning. Witnesses reported seeing Ariadna heading toward the exit, apparently trying to leave the house, but for unknown reasons, she returned shortly after. It is thought that Vanessa confronted her again at that time, escalating their argument. Investigators believe jealousy was at the heart of their conflict, as Vanessa accused Ariadna of attracting too much attention from Roddle. Messages found on phones showed that Vanessa and Roddle later discussed the tense moments from that night. Within about half an hour, 3 of the 6 had left, leaving only Roddle, Vanessa, and Ariadna inside. The case file indicates that Vanessa, influenced by alcohol, became increasingly aggressive. At some point, investigators think an altercation took place, resulting in the fatal injuries Ariadna sustained. Why did Ariadna share such an unusual message on social media that night? Initially, many assumed it was a joke, but her close friends later confirmed that she was likely feeling uneasy because of Vanessa's behavior and the tense vibe at the gathering. The post might have been her way of expressing her discomfort or reaching out for help. As pieced together the events, it became clear that Vanessa's jealousy, heightened by alcohol and her emotional instability, significantly contributed to what transpired. Instead of seeking assistance, Roddle appeared to prioritize hiding what happened, which ultimately made the situation worse. Ariadna's family has worked hard to reveal the full truth about her death. They organized protests, created social media campaigns, and made sure the public remained focused on the case. One major success was attracting international media attention, which increased pressure on Mexico's judicial system to be transparent. In late November, hundreds of people participated in a protest march in Mexico City. The preliminary court proceedings in Ariadna's case were a key moment in their quest for justice. Despite facing some resistance from authorities, her family and their legal team ensured that the case was handled openly and fairly, with all details thoroughly examined. The public and the media closely followed every step of the investigation and court process, minimizing the chances for cover-ups or misinformation. The legal process centered on the actions of Roddle and Vanessa. During the hearings, prosecutors presented strong evidence, including surveillance videos, audio recordings, and text messages from their phones. This evidence suggested not only that they helped hide Ariadna's body but also that they might have been involved in aggressive behavior leading up to her death. The defense claimed it was all a tragic accident, but the extensive witness testimonies and forensic findings raised significant doubts about that explanation. A key part of the trial was uncovering the motive behind the crime. Witnesses who knew Vanessa described her as emotionally unstable and prone to outbursts, especially when drinking. Roddle was depicted as having a questionable past with possible connections to criminal groups, which further complicated his role that night. Although both defendants denied any responsibility for Ariadna's death, their statements often conflicted with established facts, increasing suspicions against them. At this time, the final verdict has not yet been reached, and the investigation is still ongoing. However, prosecutors have charged the suspects with homicide, which may be categorized as femicide, a crime motivated by gender-based violence. In Mexico, this classification is seen as an aggravating circumstance and could result in a maximum penalty of up to 70 years in prison if both suspects are convicted. In January 2023, after reviewing conflicting autopsy results and other evidence, Mexico's Federal Attorney General's office sided with Mexico City prosecutors. The Attorney General stated that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, resulting from a blunt instrument or contact with a flat, hard surface. The coroner's conclusion that Ariadna's death was related to excessive drinking was deemed unacceptable by the Attorney General. Investigators determined that she died in Roddle's apartment on the evening of October 30th, between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., but they did not provide details regarding a possible motive. Morelos prosecutor, Carmona, denied any wrongdoing. He described the work of his forensic detectives as impeccable and dismissed the Attorney General's findings as mere opinion. Mexico City authorities increased security for the Lopez family to mitigate fears of retaliation by Roddle's accomplices. Ariadna's 7-year-old son is now living with her older brother, Omar. As the closest male role model, he has assumed the responsibilities of both guardian and father. Omar is fully committed to meeting the child's needs while also honoring his sister's memory by providing the love and stability that Ariadna once offered. The rest of the family has rallied around him, determined to help the boy cope with his loss and ensure that he grows up in a nurturing environment. Ariadna Lopez became a symbol of the fight for equality as women marched in the streets on Women's Day with her image on signs. October 1, 2020, and the quiet neighborhood of Reedley, just outside Burnley, England, seemed like any other morning. Residents on Colne Road were starting their day, with kids heading to school and folks grabbing their morning coffee. But at 8:45 a.m., a call came into Lancashire Constabulary that would shatter the calm. When officers arrived, they were met with a scene that would haunt them, a home scarred by smoke and fire. Inside, the lifeless bodies of Dr. Saman Sacharvi and her daughter, Vian Mangrio. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community, police scrambling for answers. Dr. Saman was a respected psychiatrist at the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust. Vian, a bright student at Marsden Heights High School in nearby Nelson, was known for her academic spark and enthusiasm for life. The two living together in their Colne Road home. But that morning, something had gone horribly wrong. The house showed signs of a big fire, smoke stains on the walls and charred furniture, but the flames hadn't consumed everything. Investigators noted something else: strange messages scrawled on the walls. Cryptic phrases like "my mom is evil and this is a cult house." Were these clues to what happened, or something more sinister? The police launched a full-scale investigation, cordoning off the house as forensic teams combed through the wreckage. The scene raised immediate questions. Was this a targeted act? Did the fire start accidentally, or was it set to hide something? And what about those eerie messages on the walls? Detectives began interviewing neighbors, asking if anyone had seen anything unusual in the days leading up to the tragedy. Had Saman or Vian mentioned any trouble? Did they have enemies? Or was there tension in their lives that no one knew about? Someone out there knew what happened, and detectives were determined to find them. Who could have targeted this beloved doctor and her promising daughter? To understand the weight of this true crime tragedy, let's take a moment to know Saman and Vian, who they were, where they came from, and the lives they built in the UK. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi was a woman of compassion and intellect. Born in Pakistan to a close-knit family, she was the eldest child and only daughter of her parents, now in their 80s. She was described by her brother as the apple of their eye, cherished for her ambition and warmth. From a young age, Saman excelled academically, and driven by a passion for helping others, she pursued a career in medicine, specializing in psychiatry. Her dedication to mental health defined her professional life. Saman moved to the UK in the early 2000s, settling in Burnley, where she joined the Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust in February 2020 as a junior doctor in the specialist perinatal community mental health team. Her colleague, perinatal lead consultant, remembered her as approachable, empathetic, and a joy to work with, always forming strong bonds with patients, colleagues alike. During the global issue lockdown, Saman went beyond her duties, personally delivering prescriptions to women isolating at home, ensuring they received care when access was limited. Her kindness left a lasting mark on those she served. Vian Mangrio, Saman's daughter, attended Marsden Heights Community College in Nelson, where she shone as an outstanding student. Her head teacher praised her for having a rare blend of academic talent and enthusiasm for school life. Vian loved art. Her father, Kikip Mangrio, who lives in Doha, Qatar, after divorcing Saman in 2012, was to say that her loss left his life miserable and without purpose. He recalled her as a loving, caring young girl, beloved by everyone. The morning of October 1, 2020, Saman and Vian's bodies were found. This discovery marked the beginning of a complex true crime investigation that revealed a series of alarming events. Just before 8:45 a.m., the Lancaster Constabulary received a call expressing concerns for the safety of the occupants at a semi-detached house on Colne Road. Officers quickly arrived at the location, a quiet street filled with modest homes where Saman and Vian had built their lives. What they encountered there was far from the tranquil suburban morning they had expected. Inside the house, the air was thick with the effects of a fire. Smoke stains covered the walls, and burnt furniture suggested a blaze that had been either put out or failed to spread significantly. The officers proceeded with caution. In the front bedroom upstairs, they discovered the body of Dr. Saman Sacharvi. She was lifeless, evidence indicated she had been involved in a violent struggle. An autopsy revealed that she died from strangulation. She had also been attacked prior to her death. In the upstairs area, there were signs of attempts to start a fire, but it had not successfully ignited, leaving Saman's body only partially affected by the flames. In the lounge downstairs, the situation was more tragic. Vian Mangrio's body was discovered, badly burned, making it hard to identify her right away. The severity of the fire suggested it was intentional, as flames had engulfed much of the area around her. A woolen item was found around her neck and in her mouth. Bruising in her throat indicated that she likely died from asphyxiation. Although the fire damage made it challenging for the pathologist to determine the exact cause of death, the difference between the two locations, Saman upstairs and Vian downstairs, raised important questions. Why were the bodies in separate parts of the house? Was the fire set to destroy evidence, or was it part of a more extensive plan? The officers observed unsettling messages written on the walls. These phrases seemed intentionally misleading. Vian and Saman had recently been isolating since Vian was waiting for a test result, which was ultimately negative. The timing of the messages struck the officers as suspicious. In response, the house was secured. The major crime team from Lancaster Constabulary, led by Detective Superintendent, quickly took over the case, treating the deaths as a double murder investigation from the beginning. The presence of smoke and fire damage, along with the violent circumstances of Saman's death and the condition of Vian's body, indicated that this was a deliberate act rather than an accident. Officers started canvassing the neighborhood, going door to door to ask if anyone had witnessed or heard anything unusual in the days or hours before the discovery. Meanwhile, forensic teams gathered important evidence, finding traces of potent substances in both Saman and Vian's bodies, which suggested they had been incapacitated before their deaths. These substances were later identified in court as a mixture of a sedative, wine, and fruit in a smoothie, pointing to a chilling level of premeditation. The fires also seemed intentional, one in the lounge where Vian was discovered, another in the upstairs bedroom near Saman, and a third in the kitchen, where the police believed a kettle had been ignited to simulate an electrical fire. These details implied that the perpetrator was familiar with the house, having both access and time to arrange the scene. The investigation shifted to focus on Saman and Vian's close associates, people who had been in their home on September 30, 2020, and had the means to commit such a precise act. The discovery of the bodies marked a significant turning point for the police and deeply affected the lives of those who knew Saman and Vian. News spread rapidly through Reedley. By midday, neighbors gathered outside the police perimeter, leaving flowers and condolence notes. The police continued their work tirelessly, aware that every piece of evidence, including footprints and fibers, could bring them closer to solving the case. The investigation was in full progress, with detectives working to create a timeline of events from the previous day. They established that Saman had been at home, likely either working or preparing for the evening. Vian had returned from school around 3:25 p.m. The crucial question was, what occurred during the hours between Vian's return and the discovery of their bodies the following morning? A significant development occurred when detectives examined CCTV footage from Colne Road and surrounding areas. The cameras recorded a man visiting Saman's home on September 30th, arriving at approximately 11:26 a.m. and leaving later that evening. The man was identified as Shahbaz Khan, a 51-year-old handyman from Ribble Avenue in Burnley, who had previously done work at Saman's house. This connection raised concerns, as Khan's visit coincided with the estimated time of the crime. On October 4th, police arrested 51-year-old Khan, who is suspected of murder and arson with intent to endanger life. On October 6th, police obtained a warrant to hold him for an additional 36 hours for further questioning. Detective Superintendent Supt John Holmes urged anyone with information about the incident to contact the police, especially if they have CCTV footage, dash cam recordings, or witness accounts from the Colne Road area. The investigation into Khan intensified when officers searched his home on Ribble Avenue and discovered Saman's jewelry hidden in the loft, suggesting a deeper connection to the victims. Additionally, detectives found a purple Samsung phone at Khan's residence that contained Google searches from September 30th for terms like obsessed and define obsessed, indicating a concerning state of mind. Witness interviews provided important details. A neighbor remembered that Khan had done odd jobs at Saman's house over the years and described him as polite but somewhat reserved. Another neighbor noted that Khan's van was seen parked near Colne Road more often in the weeks before the incident, but there were no reports of suspicious behavior. Family members acknowledged Khan as a trusted handyman, and none suspected him of any wrongdoing. Khan was a father of 5 who originally came from Pakistan and had lived in Burnley for several years. He worked part-time at Tesco and also took on handyman jobs. Previously, in Pakistan, he was a computer network engineer, but in the UK, he focused on various odd jobs, including a garage conversion at Saman's home. This position allowed him to have insight into the family's life. The shocking discovery of £27,000 worth of jewelry hidden in Khan's loft, along with forensic evidence of staged fires and dangerous substances, identified him as the main suspect in this disturbing crime case. During his first interrogation, Khan's statements were confusing and strange. He claimed that a supernatural being attacked him and caused the incidents at Saman House. Prosecutor David McLaughlin later explained to Preston Crown Court that Khan's story was a weak attempt to imply that he was mentally unstable. Khan also claimed that Vian was upstairs while Saman was in the kitchen when he left the house, trying to shift the blame onto the victims or imaginary characters. On October 5th, while in custody, he threw himself across his cell, claiming that a supernatural force had pushed him. Detectives considered this behavior to be a performance rather than a genuine reaction. His claims quickly fell apart under investigation, as forensic evidence showed that the victims had traces of a sedative in their systems, indicating premeditation. Additionally, phone records revealed that Khan's device was active near Colne Road on September 30th, and CCTV footage confirmed that he left the house after 10 p.m., several hours after Vian returned from school at 3:25 p.m. Khan's wife, Rabia Shahbaz, 44 years old, complicated the investigation by providing a false alibi. This raised suspicions that Khan may have either confided in her or pressured her to lie. On October 8, 2020, Khan was formally charged with 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson with intent to endanger life. The charges highlighted the brutality of the crimes. Saman died from pressure to her neck, likely caused by ligature strangulation, and had been assaulted, while Vian's death was due to asphyxiation. Her body was severely burned to hide the evidence of the crime. The arson charge resulted from 3 intentional fires set in the lounge, upstairs bedroom, and kitchen. Prosecutors later explained that Khan was motivated by his obsession with Saman's jewelry. He planned to steal it by using a sedative-laced smoothie to incapacitate both Saman and Vian. When his plan escalated, he turned to violence, strangling Saman and asphyxiating Vian before setting fires to cover his actions. The messages written on the walls were likely attempts to mislead investigators. Although handwriting experts could not definitively connect the graffiti to Khan, its content indicated that he was familiar with the victim's situation during their global issue isolation. As Khan awaited trial, detectives worked diligently to gather and solidify their evidence. The trial commenced on June 14, 2021, at Preston Crown Court. Khan pleaded not guilty to 2 murder charges and 1 charge of reckless arson. His wife, Rabia Shabazz, was charged separately with perverting the course of justice for falsely claiming that Khan had been at home all day on September 30, 2020. The prosecution, led by David McLaughlin, presented a thorough case, arguing that Khan's actions were premeditated, cruel, and motivated by financial gain. McLaughlin dismissed Khan's initial claims of supernatural involvement. Instead, Khan suggested that someone else had entered the house after he left at 10 p.m. Khan claimed that the jewelry in question had been entrusted to him for safekeeping while Saman was away, but the prosecution argued that Khan's intention was theft, which escalated to murder when he was confronted. Khan's defense initially asserted his innocence and indicated that his mental state should be examined. During his testimony, Khan described his relationship with Saman and Vian, referring to Vian as if she were a daughter. He maintained that both victims were alive when he left the house. He also stated that medication had helped clarify his thoughts, retracting the supernatural power story but not providing any credible alternative suspect. On June 29, after 3 weeks of evidence, Khan requested to dismiss the jury, expressing concerns about his mental health. However, the justice denied this request. The following day, June 30th, after being confronted with overwhelming evidence, including CCTV footage, phone records, and jewelry, Khan pleaded guilty to all charges, 2 counts of murder and 1 count of arson. This sudden change took the courtroom by surprise, eliminating the need for the jury to deliberate further but extending the suffering of the victims' families, who had already endured weeks of distressing testimony. Rabia Shabazz's trial continued as she maintained her innocence regarding charges of perverting the course of justice. Her defense argued that she was naive and confused about dates due to stress, lack of sleep, and insufficient food, mistakenly believing Khan was at Tesco on September 30th. In contrast, the prosecution asserted that her false statement made the day after Khan's arrest was a deliberate attempt to protect him. On July 1st, after less than 2 hours of discussion, the jury found her guilty. The sentencing occurred on October 5, 2021. Khan was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 34 years. The lengthy sentence reflected the premeditated and intentional nature of the murders, which were driven by financial motives. Rabia Shabazz's attempt to shield her husband, Khan, by providing a false alibi led to her conviction for perverting the course of justice, earning her a 15-month prison sentence. Early in the investigation, a second suspect, a 56-year-old man, was arrested but released without charge, narrowing the focus to Khan. Dr. Saman Mir Sacharvi's legacy endures through her compassionate work at Lancaster and South Cumbria NHS Foundation Trust, where she supported vulnerable patients during the 2020 lockdown, while Vian Mangrio's brilliance at Marsden Heights Community College continues to inspire her peers. Their loss reverberates through Reedley, a reminder of the enduring impact of 2 remarkable lives cut short on Colne Road. As of May 2025, there have been no significant updates on the case. Khan is currently in prison, serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. This concludes the tragic story from Burnley, a crime tale that reveals the depths of human greed and the strength of those left behind. Many children enjoy attending summer camps, going on trips, or even traveling abroad. These experiences allow them to discover new places and broaden their understanding of the world. However, sometimes these adventures can take a dark turn, leading to serious situations. During the summer, Brittany in France is a beautiful destination and generally considered safe, attracting thousands of schoolchildren from various countries each year. The same was true in 1996. In mid-July, a group of students from Cornwall, England, arrived in France, including a girl named Caroline Dickinson. She was one of 40 children on the trip, accompanied by 5 teachers. At 13 years old, Caroline was an average student. This was her first trip to another European country. She was excited but felt a bit down about going without her friend, and her mother had asked the teacher to look out for her. Nevertheless, Caroline quickly connected with the other children and traveled with the group to a small village named Plain Fougers of Brittany. The trip organizers had arranged for the students' accommodation at a youth hostel. Plain Fougers had only a few shops and bars, with a population of just over 3,000 people. This small, quaint village excited Caroline, as it was her first time visiting such a cozy place. After moving into the hostel for foreign guests on July 18, 1996, Caroline enjoyed making new friends and quickly became close to a girl named Camilla. Unfortunately, they were assigned to different rooms. Camilla's room had 2 bunk beds, both of which were already occupied. Not wanting to go back to her own room, Caroline decided to bring her mattress into Camilla's room. She placed it on the floor between the 2 large beds and chose to spend the night there. Before going to sleep, Camilla and Caroline talked for a long time. The last thing Camilla remembers is singing a song about the stars with Caroline before they both fell asleep. The next morning, when the girls in the room woke up, they found Caroline lying on the floor in an unnatural position, her eyes wide open. They called her name, but she didn't respond. She was already cold. A scream of horror filled the room, drawing the attention of the teachers, who rushed in and were stunned by the sight. They immediately contacted the police. When the gendarmes arrived, they concluded that it was a murder, and the girl had died under horrific circumstances. The entire community of Plain Fougers was left in shock by the tragedy. The event was so traumatic that many found it hard to discuss. Caroline had been abused, and she died from asphyxia caused by a lump of cotton wool lodged deep in her throat, which led to her suffocation. Caroline was known for her diligence. She worked hard and excelled academically. The incident shocked not only the families of the children but also the entire French village, which had never experienced anything like it. The crime had many strange aspects. Most notably, it was hard to understand how the criminal could sneak into a room full of 5 sleeping children and kill one without waking the others. How did he manage to enter the dormitory without being seen by teachers or security? Detectives soon figured out that an outsider could gain access to the building. Fire safety regulations at the time required that entrances and exits remain open, and some were left unmonitored. This meant that anyone could easily enter the building through these doors. After the girls who shared a room with Caroline recovered from the tragedy, the police were finally able to interview them. 2 witnesses reported seeing something unusual that night. One girl woke up in the middle of the night, heard quiet moans, and noticed Caroline's legs twitching. However, she thought her roommate was just having a nightmare and decided not to investigate further. Another girl also woke up around the same time and saw a shadow move across the room toward the exit. She assumed it was one of the other girls going to the bathroom. There were no screams or anything else alarming that would have drawn anyone's attention. A development built on witness testimonies that, on the night of July 18th, Caroline chose to sleep on the floor between her friends' bunk beds so she could be close to them. Around 4 a.m., an unknown man entered the dormitory through an unlocked door. He went upstairs and found Caroline asleep on the floor. He placed a large wad of cotton in her mouth, likely to silence her, then assaulted and abused her. After killing her, he left the scene. At that same time, one of the teachers was awakened by a suspicious noise and looked out the dormitory window. She saw a stranger riding away on a motorcycle but thought he was just passing by. After seeing the stranger, she checked the sleeping areas but didn't notice anything unusual. All the children appeared to be sleeping peacefully. She chose not to turn on the lights or wake anyone, believing there was no reason to do so, and returned to her bed. The murder investigation was carried out quietly, with minimal information released. This approach was in stark contrast to similar cases in England, where press conferences were held, and the public was actively engaged to help gather information. With no new information, it appeared that the case had hit a dead end. After all required examinations, the body of Caroline was returned to her parents in England. Many people attended her funeral, hoping the criminal would be caught soon. Unfortunately, in the months that followed, no suspects emerged. The investigation stalled, and even after a year, there was still no progress. Many criticized the French police for their poor handling of the case and lack of professionalism. Caroline's parents, John and Sue, and their daughter Jenny, had made the harrowing journey to France. They returned to the small village in Brittany on the anniversary of his daughter's death. He was frustrated by the detectives' lack of communication and their failure to engage the public in the investigation. He made a public appeal for help, urging the local community to remember the tragic events surrounding the death of his 13-year-old daughter. John called on residents to share any information they might have about the case, hoping to find the person responsible. Caroline's father were astonished to find out that no fingerprints had been collected from the crime scene. In the early stages of the investigation, officers simply went door to talk to local residents. However, the lead detective refused to collect DNA samples from all the men in the village, even though the number of men was small. This refusal seemed unreasonable, especially given the specific nature of the killer's actions. John believed that the perpetrator lived nearby, was familiar with the area, and could easily come and go without being noticed. As John examined the French police procedures more closely, their frustration grew. In the end, he decided to reach out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to request pressure on the French authorities for a more comprehensive investigation. Thanks to the campaign he initiated, his request was approved in August 1997, which led to significant media pressure on the gendarmes. This situation even resulted in the dismissal of the detectives who were responsible for the initial investigation in France. The new lead detective quickly concentrated on the early mistakes made in the case. They chose to reassess the limited evidence and review most of the information. However, with over a year having passed since the murder, this task proved to be quite challenging. Key witnesses were interviewed again, and based on their statements, a new composite sketch of the suspected killer was created. All information was made public promptly to prevent the same mistakes from happening again. The court also approved the victim's parents' request for DNA testing of all the men in the town where their daughter was killed. This was the first mass DNA testing conducted in the history of forensic science in Britain. Caroline's father had previously believed that the attacker was a local resident, but the testing ultimately revealed no matches. Investigators were compelled to adopt new strategies and consider events beyond the village. During this process, a new detective uncovered a troubling link to an incident in the nearby village of St. Lenaire. On the night Caroline Dickinson was murdered, an unknown man had entered a youth hostel in St. Lenaire where students were staying. The intruder entered a room where 4 teenagers were sleeping but was quickly spotted. Lights were turned on, causing chaos that forced him to flee. Following a failed abuse attempt in a field, the suspect had allegedly traveled 25 kilometers in search of a new victim. Unfortunately, this crucial lead was overlooked during the initial investigation, as no one was harmed in this incident, resulting in very few details about the man. Detectives focused on the 4 witnesses from the youth hostel who had seen the likely assailant clearly in the light. Once located and interviewed, their insights helped refine a composite sketch of the suspect. As details about the mysterious abuser circulated across France, authorities alerted all youth hostels and dormitories about the situation. They also collected information on similar crimes from comparable organizations. Although data was scarce, the number of potential suspects gradually increased. By the end of 1997, approximately 3,000 local men were identified as possible offenders. To definitively determine the killer's identity, all must undergo testing and DNA profiling. This extensive process took nearly 2 years, as investigators treated the case with utmost seriousness. After some time, investigators repeatedly encountered the name Francisco Arce Montes. He is a 47-year-old Spanish citizen with a long history of criminal activity across several European countries. His first arrest was in Germany during the 1980s, where he received a 5-year sentence for abuse. Following that, he carried out an attack in the Netherlands, resulting in a few months of imprisonment. In 1994, he was arrested in France for attempting to assault a girl at a youth hostel. His appearance matched the composite sketch created from witness descriptions. Upon examining his criminal history, detectives discovered at least 10 similar incidents across Europe, all involving the abuse of girls and teenagers in youth hostels. Unfortunately, tracking him down proved difficult since he was a migrant, continuously moving between countries and making it possible for him to be anywhere in Europe or beyond. By the end of the 1990s, Francisco had gained notoriety among law enforcement agencies throughout Europe. He emerged as the prime suspect among the various candidates. To focus solely on him and rule out the others, it was essential to apprehend Francisco and obtain a DNA sample from him. Meanwhile, testing continued, and gradually, the list of 3,000 suspects was narrowed down, eliminating individuals one by one. Francisco managed to evade capture so effectively that, at one point, even the victim's parents began to question if he would ever be found. In March, a group of Irish students went on vacation and stayed at a youth hostel near the beach. That evening, an unknown man entered one of their rooms, but 2 female students caught him. He insisted he had entered the wrong room by mistake and quickly left. Although the girls were worried about what had happened, they chose not to report the incident, assuming the man was simply confused because he was drunk. The next day, this man was seen in the same hostel. He was found in one of the rooms and acting suspiciously around 2 a.m. Shortly after, he left, claiming he had confused the rooms. 4 girls who witnessed this immediately called emergency services to report a break-in and an abuse. One of the girls stated that she had been abused while she slept. She provided her underwear for examination and consented to all necessary tests. The police caught the mysterious criminal after one of the Irish students recognized him the following day. The girl was in the room that was broken into yesterday and noticed the suspicious man walking around the pool as if nothing had happened. She immediately called 911, and he was arrested. He was taken to the Miami Beach Police Department for questioning. The man denied being involved in the suspicious activities at the youth hostel over the past few days. During his interview with law enforcement, he eventually provided his real name, Francisco Montes. He claimed to be a solo traveler who had spent considerable time in South America and European countries, including Germany and France, and was currently traveling around the United States. During his conversation with the detectives, he made several strange, claiming he hadn't committed any crime and that he had merely entered other people's rooms by accident while drunk. Francisco repeatedly asked, in anger, whether masturbation was illegal in the United States, suggesting that his actions weren't harmful. His behavior was both provocative and odd. He ultimately took a DNA test and was held for further investigation. By this time, Caroline's murder had gone cold, until Tommy Onko, an immigration officer at the Detroit airport, picked up a British newspaper and read a story about the 5th anniversary of the unsolved murder. The article named Montes as a possible suspect, and on a whim, Onko decided to look up immigration information to see if a man by that name had ever been to the United States. He found the name of Francisco Arce Montes, who was in fact in police custody in Miami Beach. Onko contacted French and British authorities and was able to confirm Francisco's date of birth and hometown. Meanwhile, Montes was arrested in Miami Beach for abusing an Irish tourist at a youth hostel. The crime was similar to the modus operandi in Caroline's case, with Montes being able to enter the girls' rooms without waking the victim or her roommate. Francisco was arrested by Sergeant, later Major, Angel Vasquez of the Miami Beach Police Department. Major Vasquez obtained a DNA sample from Montez, which matched the DNA from the male fluid at the Irish Students' Youth Hostel. In addition, Major Vasquez linked Montez to 4 other similar incidents in Miami Beach. Combined with Onco's sources, investigators linked Francisco to Caroline's murder. Francisco's DNA was later matched to DNA from the Caroline Dickinson murder investigation. The state of Florida suspended charges against Francisco to allow for his extradition to France to face charges for Caroline's murder. Finally, there was a genuine possibility of solving Caroline's murder. The major obstacle was the distance. At any moment, Francisco could be released on bail and vanish, traveling anywhere in the world. They began communicating with detectives in France through the former consul. Their concerns were finally alleviated when they received confirmation of Francisco's name and date of birth, which matched the information held by French authorities. It was discovered that Francisco had traveled around Europe before coming to the United States, where he was working as a truck driver. In March 2001, Francisco was arrested in Florida and identified as the main suspect in the murder of Caroline Dickinson, which occurred in France 5 years earlier. At this point, the young women who had been attacked in Miami recognized Francisco as the intruder who had broken into their dorm rooms, enabling the authorities to detain him. DNA from bodily fluids found on Caroline's body was sent to France for testing to confirm a match. This was a critical moment for European investigators and Caroline's parents. A few days later, the test results revealed an almost 100% match. Francisco Montez was extradited from the United States to France after 6 months, and it took another 2 years for him to confess to his crimes. He admitted to abusing a 13-year-old girl in France but claimed that Caroline Dickinson's death was accidental. Francisco argued that he had a mental illness, which he believed made him unaccountable for his actions. However, his attempt to avoid punishment due to insanity was unsuccessful. Experts concluded he was sane and capable of standing trial following several assessments. During the trial, he rarely spoke, mostly in Spanish, and appeared calm, showing no remorse for his actions. He was required to testify, and Francisco explained in French how the murder occurred. He stated that the defendant had traveled from Rennes to Plain Fougers with plans to return to England, where he was residing at the time. After getting lost, he sought a place to stay for the night and found the only building in the small village with its lights on, a youth hostel. He entered at night and saw that everyone was asleep. He began to check the rooms and noticed Caroline sleeping on the floor, whom he viewed as an easy target. Francisco approached her, covered her mouth with his hand, and then assaulted her. He ended up abusing her and accidentally killed her with a piece of cotton wool that suffocated her. Panicked, he fled the scene. During the trial, Francisco asked the victim's parents for forgiveness, acknowledging, he knows the Dickinson family will never forgive him. The parents of Caroline, who were divorced at the time, along with their youngest daughter, attended the trial and provided testimony. They described their daughter as an innocent girl who wanted to explore the world and travel to different countries. This trip was a step towards fulfilling her dream. The parents had allowed Caroline to go on the trip without any concerns, believing that France was a safe place and that she would be supervised by her teachers. Caroline and her classmates were scheduled to visit various interesting sites. No one could have predicted the tragic outcome of this journey. Had they known, they would never have permitted their daughter to go. They did not forgive the criminal. During the trial, details about the defendant's life were uncovered. His mental health issues began in his teenage years when he started showing symptoms of obsessive-compulsive disorder. He was fixated on cleanliness, using a handkerchief to open doors and turn on lights, avoiding touching anything with his bare hands, meticulously washing everything with mineral water and soap multiple times. At the age of 20, Francisco started experiencing difficulties. After his friends learned about this, they sent him to a psychiatrist, who diagnosed him with depression and progressive schizophrenia. In the mid-1970s, he left Spain and traveled across Europe. He lived a transient lifestyle, working as a waiter, hotel doorman, or driver, but primarily relied on money from his father. An acquaintance noted that Francisco was very familiar with all the youth hostels in Europe and often sought the company of girls, particularly those aged 11 to 12, considering anyone over 20 to be too old for him. His friend also recalled a chilling admission from Francisco, where he expressed that he saw nothing wrong with killing a person. At one point, he had a girlfriend whom he physically abused. She bore him a son but eventually left him due to the violence. Afterward, he went on another trip where he continued to assault and abuse women. On June 14, 2004, following a 3-week trial, Francisco Arce Montes was found guilty of murdering and abusing Caroline Dickinson. He was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The victim's parents felt a sense of relief, believing that their 8 years of waiting for justice and their activism had led to the conviction of their daughter's murderer. However, the situation did not end there. After 20 years, he filed an appeal but later withdrew it. Everyone was shocked by the long list of offenses, which took around 10 minutes to read. Over the 20 years before receiving a life sentence, he committed 4 abuses in Germany. South American authorities also believe he abused at least a dozen women within their borders, in addition to attacking many others. Additionally, there was one attempted abuse in France before Caroline's death. It's evident that the true extent of his crimes could have been much larger, but the trial only considered officially recorded cases where victims had reported to the police. Notably, all the other victims survived. Caroline may have been the only one who did not survive after being abused. U.S. detectives investigating his case believe he is linked to a series of abuses and murders in both the U.S. and Europe. His conviction has led to serious questions about why he was not apprehended sooner. He could have been arrested in Spain as early as autumn 1997, a year after Caroline's murder, yet he avoided capture. The lack of cooperation among law enforcement agencies across European countries hindered the process of transferring him to the French gendarmerie. The parents of the victim were troubled by this as well. Despite Francisco's conviction, the victim's mother and father continued to voice their frustration about the insufficient collaboration between international authorities, which allowed criminals to keep committing offenses without facing consequences. The parents of Caroline pushed for the establishment of an international DNA database to help address the situation. Throughout their advocacy, they frequently shared their daughter's story. This case highlighted the importance of collaboration among law enforcement agencies, even across different continents, in stopping dangerous criminals. Francisco's legal troubles continued after Caroline's case. The last people heard from Francisco in 2015, when he was convicted of abusing a young woman, a year after he had killed Caroline. He was extradited to Spain to face charges for the abuse of an 18-year-old girl. He deceived her into allowing him into her apartment building by pretending he had lost his keys. Once inside, he threatened her with a knife and abused her. For this crime, he was extradited and tried in Spain, where he was sentenced to 11 years in prison. He is expected to serve his jail time in Spain once he has been released from prison in France, where he is scheduled to stay until January 2027. Francisco has nearly run out of options for appealing his sentence. His earliest opportunity for release will be in 2038. However, it is improbable that he will live to see his 88th birthday while imprisoned.